The dirt hadn't even finished covering my daughter's casket when my son-in-law leaned over and whispered the words that would seal his fate. "We need to sell the house next week, Wallace." He thought I was just a grieving old man living in his backyard, a useless relic he could discard along with his wife's memory. He didn't know about the hidden safe I would find behind her vanity mirror or the USB drive inside that contained a secret so dark it would send him to prison for life. I am Wallace Jefferson, and this is how I destroyed the man who thought he could get away with murder. If you have ever been underestimated by someone who mistook your silence for weakness, hit that like button and subscribe because you are about to witness justice served cold. The Chicago rain felt like needles against my skin standing there at the edge of the open grave. It was a gray, miserable October morning, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you feel every single one of your 68 years. My daughter Jasmine was inside that mahogany box, 32 years old, my baby girl. The medical report said it was respiratory failure due to complications from asthma. They said her lungs just gave out in the middle of the night. But looking at the man standing next to me, I felt a different kind of sickness rising in my throat. Brent Miller stood under a large black umbrella, holding it only over himself while the rain soaked the shoulder of my old funeral suit. He was wearing a custom-fitted Italian suit that probably cost more than my entire car. He checked his wrist not to wipe away a tear, but to look at his gold Rolex. He was impatient. His wife was being lowered into the ground, and he looked like he was waiting for an Uber. Then it happened. A sharp, piercing electronic chime cut through the sound of the pastor's prayer. It was the notification sound for a stock trading app. I knew that sound because I used to track financial crimes for a living back before I retired and became just the old gardener in the back house. Most people would have fumbled to silence the phone. They would have looked embarrassed. Brent didn't. He calmly pulled the phone from his pocket, glanced at the screen, and tapped a few buttons before sliding it back. He didn't even look up at the casket. That was the moment the grief in my chest hardened into something cold and sharp. I watched him. I used to be a forensic audit specialist for the Department of Justice. I spent 30 years reading people not by their words, but by their micro-expressions and their financial footprints. And what I saw in Brent wasn't a grieving husband. I saw a man calculating his net worth. The service ended. The few friends Jasmine had left after marrying this man came by to toss a flower or a handful of dirt. I stood frozen, my hand gripping my cane until my knuckles turned white. Brent leaned in close. His breath smelled of expensive scotch and peppermints. "Wallace, we need to talk," he said, his voice low but lacking any warmth. I turned to look at him. His blue eyes were clear, devoid of any redness. Not a single tear shed for the woman who had paid for the suit on his back and the watch on his wrist. "Talk." I rasped my voice thick with unshed tears. "Now, Brent, here." He sighed, a sound of exaggerated patience as if dealing with a slow child. "Look, the market is volatile right now. I spoke to a broker this morning. We can list the estate by Monday. I want to get ahead of the curve. I don't want to be surrounded by these sad memories, Wallace. I need to move on. I need to heal. Heal." The word sounded like an insult coming from his mouth. Jasmine had been dead for 3 days. 3 days, and he was already talking about listing the estate. "This is Jasmine's home," I said quietly. "She built that life. She designed that kitchen. She planted those roses. And she left behind a mountain of debt." "Wallace," he interrupted, his voice sharp and hissing, like steam escaping a valve. "You don't know the half of it. Jasmine was terrible with money. She spent recklessly. I am the one left holding the bag. I have to liquidate assets to cover her mistakes." I stared at him. That was the first lie. A big one. Jasmine was a certified public accountant. She was the CFO of a mid-sized logistics firm. She was the most organized financial mind I had ever known. I taught her everything she knew about compounding interest and asset protection before she was 12. Jasmine didn't have debt. Jasmine had portfolios. But I didn't correct him. Not yet. I let my shoulders slump. I let my mouth hang open slightly, playing the part of the confused, devastated father. "So here is how it is going to work," Brent continued, emboldened by my silence. "You have 24 hours to clear your things out of the granny flat. I can't have a tenant on the property when I show it to buyers. It devalues the listing. The new owners will want a clean slate. A tenant. That is what I was to him. Not his father-in-law, not the grandfather of his son. Just a tenant in the guest house my daughter had built specifically so I could be close to my grandson, Owen. "Where am I supposed to go, Brent?" I asked, keeping my voice trembling. He shrugged, adjusting his silk tie. "You have a pension, right? Find a motel, or maybe a retirement community." "Honestly, Wallace, it is time you stopped living off Jasmine's charity. It is embarrassing." He checked his watch again. "I have a meeting with the funeral director to settle the bill. Then I am meeting the staging company at the house. Make sure you are gone by tomorrow afternoon. Don't make me call the sheriff to evict an old man. It wouldn't look good for either of us." He turned on his heel and walked away. He didn't walk toward the family limousine. He walked toward a sleek black sports car parked on the access road. The passenger window rolled down and I saw a woman inside. She was young, blonde, and wearing sunglasses on a rainy day. She wasn't family. I memorized the license plate instantly. Old habits die hard. I stood alone by the grave as the gravediggers began their work. The rain soaked through my coat, but I didn't feel the cold anymore. I felt a fire lighting up in my gut, a fire I hadn't felt since my days chasing down cartel money launderers in the 90s. Living off her charity, he had said. I walked to the bus stop, my shoes squishing in the mud. I didn't drive my truck today because I wanted to keep up appearances. Let him think I am helpless. Let him think I am poor. The bus ride back to the suburbs was long and it gave me time to think. I looked out the window watching the city pass by, but my mind was replaying the last 10 years. When my wife died, I was lost. It was Jasmine who pulled me back. She insisted I sell my big empty house and move into the accessory dwelling unit she was building behind her new Victorian mansion. "Dad," she had said, her eyes shining with pride, "I made it. I want you close. I want Owen to know his grandpa." Brent had been there too, smiling that salesman smile. He was charming back then, a visionary entrepreneur he called himself. But I knew what he was. I checked his background the week they got engaged. Failed startups, maxed out credit cards, a lawsuit from a former business partner that was settled out of court. I warned Jasmine, but she was in love. She said he had potential. She said she could handle the finances while he chased his dreams. And now here we were. The visionary was driving a Porsche bought with my daughter's salary, and I was being evicted from the home my daughter built. I got off the bus a block away from the house. It was a beautiful property. A sprawling Victorian estate with a manicured lawn and a separate garage converted into my living space. The granny flat. It was modest, but it was mine. Or so I thought. I walked up the driveway. The house was dark. Brent wasn't back yet, probably celebrating his freedom with the woman in the sports car. I walked around the back to my unit. I unlocked the door and the smell of old books and lemon polish greeted me. This was my sanctuary. I sat down in my armchair and looked at the photo of Jasmine on the mantel. She was laughing, holding Owen when he was a baby. She left a mountain of debt. The words echoed in my head. Impossible. Jasmine was meticulous. Unless someone else had been draining the accounts. Unless someone had been forging signatures. I stood up and paced the small room. My knees ached, but my mind was racing. Why now? Why did she die now? Her asthma was mild. She had an inhaler in every room. She swam 3 times a week. She was healthy. And why was Brent in such a rush to sell? He said the market was volatile. That was a lie. The real estate market in this area had been stagnant for months. Anyone with a brain knew you held on to property right now. You didn't panic sell unless you needed cash. Fast. Liquidity. That was the word. Brent needed liquidity. He was desperate. I had seen that look in the eyes of embezzlers 1,000 times. The sweaty upper lip, the constant checking of the time, the aggression disguised as business acumen. Brent was in trouble. Deep trouble. And my daughter was the obstacle that had been removed. And now I was the obstacle. I walked over to the window and looked at the main house. It loomed large and silent in the twilight. Somewhere inside that house was the truth. Jasmine wouldn't have left me unprotected. She wouldn't have left Owen unprotected. She knew who she married. In the last year, I had seen the tension in her face, the dark circles under her eyes. She stopped talking about work. She stopped talking about Brent's projects. She was hiding something. I realized then that I couldn't leave. If I packed my bags and went to a motel, I would be abandoning the only evidence I had. I would be abandoning Owen, my grandson. Where was Owen? Brent hadn't brought him to the funeral. He said Owen was too young, that it would be too traumatic. He left an 8-year-old boy with a nanny on the day his mother was buried. I clenched my fists. No, I wasn't going anywhere. Brent wanted a war, he was going to get one. but not the kind he expected. He expected a shouting match. He expected an old man begging for mercy. He was going to get a forensic audit of his entire life. I went to my closet and pulled down an old shoebox from the top shelf. Inside wasn't money or old letters. It was my old kit. A high-fidelity voice recorder, a set of lockpicks I hadn't touched in years, and a small notepad. I sat back down and opened the notepad. I wrote down 3 things. 1. Find out who the woman in the car is. 2. Get access to Jasmine's financial records. 3. Find out why Brent needs money so badly that he would sell his wife's grave before the grass grew over it. I looked at the clock. It was 5 p.m. Brent said he was meeting the staging company tomorrow. That meant tonight the house would be empty or he would be distracted. I needed to get into the main house. I needed to see Jasmine's bedroom, specifically her vanity. Jasmine had a habit since she was a teenager. She hid things. Not in obvious places like under the mattress. She liked structural hiding spots, behind baseboards, inside hollowed-out books. If she knew she was in trouble, she would have left a breadcrumb. I waited until the sun went down completely. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy and misty. Headlights swept across the driveway. Brent was home. I watched through the blinds. He got out of the car, but he wasn't alone. The blonde woman was with him. They were laughing on the day of my daughter's funeral. They walked into the house like they owned the world. I saw the lights flicker on in the living room, then the kitchen. I waited. I had to be patient. Patience was the only weapon an old man had against a young fool. 2 hours later, the lights downstairs went out. The light in the master bedroom, Jasmine's bedroom, turned on. I felt a surge of nausea imagining him in there with her, but I pushed it down. I waited another hour until the bedroom light went out. It was time. I put on my dark coat and slipped the lockpicks into my pocket. I stepped out of my granny flat and moved through the shadows of the garden my daughter had planted. I knew the security code for the back door, but Brent might have changed it. I tried the keypad. 1015, Jasmine's birthday. Error. Red light. Of course, he changed it. I tried again. 0000, green light. The lock clicked open. I almost laughed. Arrogant and lazy, the perfect combination for a criminal. I slipped inside the kitchen. It smelled of takeout food and expensive perfume, not Jasmine's perfume. Hers was lavender and vanilla. This smell was sharp, chemical, and cheap despite the price tag. I moved silently through the hallway, avoiding the third step on the stairs that always creaked. I knew this house better than Brent did. I helped fix the wiring. I helped sand the floors. I reached the top of the stairs. The door to the master bedroom was slightly ajar. I could hear heavy breathing, snoring. I crept past their door towards the guest room, which Jasmine used as her home office. But then I stopped. Jasmine didn't keep her secrets in her office. She kept them close. I remembered a conversation we had a month ago. She was sitting at her vanity removing her makeup. She looked tired. She saw me looking at her in the mirror, and she said, "Dad, sometimes I feel like I'm losing control of my own reflection. I wish I could just look behind the glass and find a different life." It was a strange thing to say. At the time, I thought she was just depressed. Now I realized it was a clue. Behind the glass. I needed to get into the master bedroom. With them sleeping inside, it was madness. If I was caught, he could shoot me. He could claim I was an intruder. The stand your ground laws would protect him, but I had no choice. I took a breath, steadied my shaking hands, and pushed the door open just an inch more. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, illuminating the bed. Brent was sprawled out asleep. The woman was next to him. The vanity was on the far wall, a massive antique mirror attached to the wall. I moved across the carpet. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Every step felt like a mile. I reached the vanity. I looked at the mirror. It was screwed into the wall. But Jasmine said behind the glass. I ran my fingers along the edge of the frame. On the bottom right side, I felt a small imperfection, a latch. I glanced at the bed. Brent shifted, mumbling something in his sleep. I froze. He settled. I pressed the latch. The mirror didn't swing out. It slid up, just a fraction of an inch. I used both hands and lifted. It was heavy. The mirror slid up on silent tracks, revealing a hollowed-out section of the drywall behind it. And there it was, a small gray metal safe embedded in the studs. I stared at it. I didn't have the combination. I looked at the keypad on the safe. 4 digits. I tried Jasmine's birthday again. Error. I tried Owen's birthday. Error. I tried the anniversary of their wedding. Error. I paused. Think Wallace. Think like Jasmine. What was the one date that Brent would never know? The one date that meant everything to her, but nothing to him. My wife's death date. The day Jasmine promised she would always take care of the family. I typed it in. 0412. Click. The safe door popped open. My hands were shaking as I reached inside. There was a stack of cash wrapped in rubber bands, a thick leather notebook, and a silver USB drive, and on top of it all a folded piece of yellow-lined paper. I unfolded it in the moonlight. I recognized her handwriting immediately, but it was shaky, hurried. Dad, if you are reading this, I am already gone. Do not trust the medical report. Do not trust Brent. Check the USB drive. Protect Owen. They killed me. I almost dropped the paper. The room spun. They killed me. Not asthma. Murder. Suddenly the bed creaked loudly. What was that? It was Brent's voice. Groggy but awake. I was standing 5 feet away from him holding the evidence of his crime, and he was sitting up. I had seconds. Maybe less. I shoved the note, the USB, and the notebook into my pockets. I didn't have time to grab the cash. I slid the mirror down. It clicked into place just as the bedside lamp flickered on. I dove to the floor, rolling under the heavy velvet drapes near the window just as the room flooded with light. Babe, what is it? The woman asked, her voice sleepy. I heard something, Brent muttered. He was getting out of bed. I could see his bare feet hitting the floor inches from where I was hiding. He walked toward the vanity. He stood right in front of the mirror. I held my breath, pressing my hand over my mouth. He was looking at the mirror. Had I closed it all the way? Was it crooked? He stood there for an eternity. Then he sighed. Just the house settling, or that damn old man in the backyard making noise. He walked back to the bed. God, I can't wait to sell this place. It gives me the creeps. The light clicked off. I waited 10 minutes, then 20. When his snoring resumed, I crawled out of the room, down the stairs, and out the back door into the cold night air. I collapsed into my armchair in the granny flat, my chest heaving. I pulled the crumpled note out of my pocket. They killed me. I looked at the main house. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a crime scene. And I was the only detective on the case. Brent Miller wanted to sell the house next week. He wanted to erase the past, but he just made the biggest mistake of his life. He left the witness alive. I picked up my phone and dialed Vance, my old contact at the bureau. It was 3 a.m. Vance, I whispered, wake up. We have a homicide. And tomorrow I'm going to look that son of a bitch in the eye and tell him I'm happy to move out. I'm going to let him think he won, because the higher he climbs, the harder he is going to fall. The next morning I stood at the threshold of the master bedroom, and the air inside felt heavy and violated. Brent had given me strict orders to clear out Jasmine's personal effects because he wanted the room neutralized for the estate agents. Neutralized. As if my daughter were a stain he needed to bleach away to increase the property value. I stepped inside, and the scent of her lavender perfume hit me first, followed immediately by the stale odor of Brent's expensive cigars. I looked up at the corner of the ceiling where the crown molding met the wall. A small red LED blinked in the shadows, a Wi-Fi security camera. Brent was watching me. He wanted to make sure the old man didn't steal any of his valuables. I knew these cameras well from my time contracting security for federal witness safe houses in the late 90s. They had a wide-angle lens, but they had a weakness. The depth of field was poor, and the peripheral vision distorted at the edges. There was a blind spot directly beneath it, and another one behind the heavy oak wardrobe door if I angled it just right. I shuffled into the room, dragging my feet, playing the part of the defeated, broken father. I moved towards the vanity, the spot Jasmine had mentioned in the note I found last night, behind the glass. I opened the wardrobe door, creating a visual shield between me and the camera's unblinking eye. To Brent, watching on his phone, it would look like I was just packing her clothes into boxes. I turned to the large ornate mirror bolted to the wall above the vanity. It was heavy, a vintage piece I had helped her hang 5 years ago. I ran my knuckles along the wall beside it. Solid stud. Solid stud. I tapped the center right behind the glass. Thump. Hollow. A different resonance. Most people wouldn't hear it, but I spent 20 years listening for the hollow sound of false bottoms in shipping containers and money laundering fronts. I needed to move the mirror without alerting the motion sensors or making too much noise. I gripped the frame. It wasn't screwed in with standard brackets. It was on a French cleat system but modified. I lifted it gently. It slid up and off with a soft scrape. I set it down on the plush carpet, silent as a ghost. The wall behind it looked normal, just patterned wallpaper. But my eyes caught the seam immediately. A hairline cut in the paper almost invisible to the naked eye. I pulled my box cutter from my pocket. I always carried it part of my handyman costume that made everyone overlook me. I slid the razor-sharp blade under the seam and peeled back a square of wallpaper. There it was, a wall safe. Not a cheap digital one from a hardware store, but a heavy-duty Titan model recessed into the studs. The keypad was dusty, but the steel felt cold and serious under my fingertips. I needed a code, 4 digits. I tried Jasmine's birthday. Red light. I tried Owen's birthday. Red light. I tried the day she graduated. Red light. My hands were sweating. I wiped them on my trousers. Think Wallace. Think like her. What was the one day that defined us? The one day that forged the bond between father and daughter that even death couldn't break. August 12th, the day my wife, her mother, died in that car accident. The day Jasmine swore she would make me proud, and I swore I would always protect her. 0812. The mechanism whirred. A soft click echoed in the silent room like a gunshot. The heavy steel door popped open. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I reached inside. It was tight. There was a stack of bills banded tightly, $10,000 in hundreds. A small black notebook, and a silver USB drive taped to a white envelope. I pulled the envelope out. On the front, in Jasmine's neat looping handwriting, were the words, "Dad, for your eyes only." I tore it open. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the note. "Dad, if you are reading this, I am already gone. Do not trust the medical report. It wasn't asthma. Check the USB drive. Protect Owen. They killed me. The air left my lungs. They, plural, they killed me. Rage, hot and blinding, flooded my vision. This wasn't grief anymore. This was war. My daughter hadn't died. She was murdered. And the man sleeping down the hall, the man who checked his stocks at her funeral, was the prime suspect. Creak. The sound of a floorboard on the stairs. I froze. The house was supposed to be empty. Brent said he was going to the office to meet with his lawyers, but I heard the heavy, confident tread of expensive leather shoes on the hardwood. He was back, and he was coming up. I looked at the mess. The safe was open. The wallpaper was peeled back. The mirror was on the floor. I was standing in the blind spot, but if he walked into the room, I was dead. Or worse, the evidence was gone. I shoved the envelope, the USB, and the notebook into the inside pocket of my jacket. I left the cash. If he found the cash missing, he'd know someone was here. I slammed the safe door shut. It clicked. I smoothed the wallpaper back over it. It wasn't perfect, but in the dim light it might pass. The footsteps reached the landing. I grabbed the heavy mirror. It weighed 50 pounds. I hoisted it up, did it. My old rotator cuff screamed in protest. I aligned the cleats. Dad Brent's voice boomed from the hallway. "Are you in there?" He was 10 feet away. The mirror wouldn't seat. The cleat wasn't catching. "Dad." I pushed harder. The mirror slid into place with a soft thud just as the doorknob turned. I stepped back, grabbing a heavy crystal vase from the vanity top. Brent pushed the door open. He stood there, eyes narrowing, scanning the room. He looked at the wardrobe door, blocking the camera's view. He looked at me. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice suspicious. "Why is the wardrobe open?" I let my hand spasm. The crystal vase slipped from my fingers. Crash. The sound was explosive in the tension-filled room. Shards of glass exploded across the carpet, scattering light like diamonds. "Oh, Lord," I stammered, my voice trembling with feigned senility. "My hands. They don't work like they used to. I was just trying to dust Brent. I wanted it to look nice for the buyers." I bent down, making a show of trying to pick up the sharp glass with shaking hands. "I am so sorry. I'll pay for it. Take it out of my pension." Brent stared at me. The suspicion in his eyes warred with his arrogance. He saw a clumsy, useless old man who couldn't even hold a vase. He didn't see the man who had just secured the evidence that would put him in federal prison. He sneered, a look of pure disgust twisting his face. "Leave it, Wallace. Just get out. You're making a mess. You're useless. I can clean it, I mumbled, playing the part. I said, get out, he barked. Go back to your shack. I'll have the cleaners deal with this. And don't come back in here without my permission. I have valuable things in this house. I nodded, keeping my head down, clutching my jacket tight against my chest where the USB drive burned against my heart. Yes, Brent. Of course. I'm leaving. I shuffled past him, making sure to stumble slightly as I crossed the threshold. I felt his eyes boring into my back. He watched me go down the stairs. I walked out the front door and into the gray morning light. My heart was racing at 100 miles an hour, but my face was stone. Useless. That's what he called me. I touched the pocket of my jacket. I walked toward the granny flat, the wind biting at my face. I wasn't useless. I was dangerous. And Brent Miller had just made the fatal mistake of letting the fox back into the hen house. The glow of my old laptop screen was the only light in the room, casting long, dancing shadows against the walls of the granny flat. It was 3 a.m, and the silence of the night felt heavy, like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I had retrieved my old air-gapped computer from the bottom of a locked trunk. It was a relic from my days at the Department of Justice, a machine that had never touched the internet and never would. Brent could monitor the Wi-Fi in the main house all he wanted, but he couldn't see this. My hands were steady as I plugged in the silver USB drive I had stolen from the safe, but my heart was beating a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I waited for the drive to mount. A folder appeared on the desktop simply titled Project Freedom. My breath caught in my throat. Jasmine was a certified public accountant. She didn't name things randomly. Project Freedom meant she was planning an escape. She was building a case. I clicked the folder open and a cascade of subfolders appeared. Financials, medical, audio logs. I started with the financials. I needed to understand the motive before I could face the crime. I opened the first spreadsheet and my forensic eye took over, suppressing the grieving father within. It was a masterclass in forensic accounting. Jasmine had tracked every penny. There were transfers, hundreds of them, small amounts, at first $200 here, $500 there. Then they grew, $5,000, $10,000, all moving from their joint savings account into a series of shell companies with names like Vesta Holdings and Zenith Capital. I traced the routing numbers Jasmine had highlighted in red. They didn't lead to investment firms in New York or London. They bounced through servers in Estonia and landed in cryptocurrency wallets registered in the Cayman Islands. Brent wasn't just bad with money, he was laundering it. I scrolled down. There were screenshots of text messages between Brent and a contact listed only as K. She is asking questions about the withdrawals, Brent wrote. Stalher K replied, "The market is about to turn. We need more liquidity." "I don't have it," Brent answered. "The credit cards are maxed. The equity line is frozen." "Fix it," K wrote. "Or we fix you." I sat back in my chair, the leather creaking softly. Liquidity. That was the word Brent had used at the funeral. He needed to sell the house because he had siphoned everything else dry. He was gambling on crypto futures and he was losing, and the people he owed weren't the kind you could ask for an extension. I closed the financial folder. I knew the why. Now I needed to know the how. I moved the cursor to the folder marked Audio Logs. There were 12 files dated over the last 6 weeks. I put on my headphones over my ears and clicked the first one. Jasmine's voice filled my head, clear and terrified. "It is September 12th. I found the second credit card statement today. He forged my signature. I confronted him and he cried. He said it was for a surprise investment for Owen's college fund. He is lying. I can see it in his eyes. He looks at me like I am a problem he needs to solve." I skipped ahead 3 weeks. The file was dated October 1st. Her voice sounded different now, thinner, weaker. "I am so tired. I don't understand it. My asthma has been under control since college, but I can't catch my breath. I feel dizzy all the time, sweaty. My hands shake so much I can barely type. Dr. Sterling said my labs were fine, but I don't feel fine. Brent has been so helpful, though. He brings me my medicine every night. He insists on it. He says I am too weak to do it myself." I froze. The medical report said respiratory failure, asthma, but dizziness, shaking, sweating. Those weren't asthma symptoms. I clicked the next file, October 10th, 3 days before she died. Her voice was a whisper, a raspy sound that clawed at my heart. I checked the trash today. Brent forgot to empty the bathroom bin. I found the vial. It looks like my insulin. It has the label. But the cap is a slightly different shade of orange. I take long-acting insulin. It keeps my blood sugar stable. But this vial, it smells like the fast-acting kind. The kind you take before a heavy meal. If I take this at night on an empty stomach, my blood sugar will crash. I will go into a coma. There was a long pause in the recording. I could hear her ragged breathing. He is switching the meds, Dad. He isn't treating my diabetes. He is weaponizing it. He is inducing hypoglycemia every single night. That is why I am weak. That is why my heart races. He is poisoning me slowly so it looks like natural causes. I tried to hide the vial, but he came in. He saw me looking at it. The look on his face, Dad. It wasn't anger. It was nothing. It was dead. He took the trash out immediately. I am scared to eat. I am scared to sleep. But I have to pretend. If I leave now, he will hurt Owen. I have to get the evidence out. The recording ended with a sharp click. I ripped the headphones off my head and threw them onto the desk. A roar of pure primal rage erupted from my chest, but I clamped my hand over my mouth to stifle it. It wasn't asthma. It wasn't an accident. It was murder. Calculated, cold-blooded murder. Brent Miller had injected my daughter with lethal doses of insulin night after night, watching her tremble and sweat, watching the life drain out of her, and he called it care. He did it while my grandson slept in the next room. He did it so he could liquidate her assets to pay off a gambling debt. I stood up so fast my chair tipped over. I didn't care about the noise. I walked to the closet. I reached up to the top shelf behind the winter coats and pulled down the metal lockbox I had kept since I left the service. I dialed the combination. Inside, resting on a bed of oil-stained cloth, was my Smith & Wesson revolver. It was loaded. It had been loaded for 10 years. I took it out. The steel was cold and heavy in my hand. It felt like an answer. It felt like justice. I checked the cylinder. 6 rounds. More than enough. I walked to the window. The rain had started again, tapping against the glass like accusing fingers. I looked across the wet yard to the main house. It was dark. Brent was sleeping in that bed. The bed where my daughter died. He was probably dreaming about the money he would make from the sale, about the new life he would start with that blonde woman. It would be so easy. I knew how to pick the lock. I had done it just hours ago. I could walk up those stairs. I could stand over him. I could wake him up just so he could see my face, just so he could know that I knew. And then I could end it. I gripped the handle of the gun until my hand shook. I imagined the sound, the flash, the look of terror in his eyes replacing that arrogant smirk. It would be righteous. It would be what any father would do. I put my hand on the doorknob of the granny flat. I started to turn it, and then I stopped. A voice echoed in my head. Not Jasmine's voice, my own voice. From 20 years ago, standing in a courtroom testifying against a corporate embezzler who had stolen millions from pension funds. Emotion is the enemy of evidence. That was the rule. That was the code I lived by. When you get emotional, you make mistakes. When you act on impulse, you leave traces. If I walked over there and shot Brent Miller, I would go to prison for the rest of my life. I was a black man in a wealthy suburb shooting a white man in his own home. The narrative would be written before the handcuffs clicked. Grieving father snaps. Tragic murder-suicide. And Owen. My God, Owen. If I went to prison, Owen would go into the system. Or worse, he would go to Brent's parents, people I had never trusted, people who raised a monster. Or even worse, Brent had associates. That man Kay. If Brent died, the debt wouldn't just disappear. They would come for the assets. They might come for the next of kin. I couldn't protect Owen from a prison cell. And killing Brent was too quick. It was too merciful. A bullet takes a second. Jasmine suffered for weeks. She lived in terror. She watched her husband turn into her executioner. Brent didn't deserve a quick exit. He deserved to be dismantled. He deserved to lose everything. His reputation, his freedom, his money, his arrogance. I wanted him to feel the walls closing in. I wanted him to look at me and realize that the old man he dismissed was the architect of his destruction. I slowly released the doorknob. I walked back to the desk and set the gun down next to the laptop. I looked at the screen at the rows of numbers and the audio files. Jasmine didn't leave me a gun. She left me a roadmap. She left me the evidence. She wanted me to finish what she started. Project Freedom wasn't just about escaping. It was about exposing him. I sat back down. The rage was still there, burning hot in my gut, but now it was focused. It was a laser instead of a wildfire. I needed a plan. Brent wanted to sell the house. He needed the money by next week. That was his pressure point. If I stopped the sale, he would panic. If he panicked, he would make mistakes. And when he made mistakes, I would be there to catch every single one of them. But I couldn't just say no. He had legal power. He was the husband. I needed to make him believe I was exactly what he thought I was, a senile, greedy old man. I needed to become the camouflage he wouldn't look twice at. I looked at the audio file again, the one where Jasmine mentioned the insulin vial. He took the trash out immediately, she had said. Brent was lazy. He was arrogant. He probably thought throwing it in the kitchen bin was enough. But if he was truly scared, he wouldn't just throw it away. He would bury it, or hide it. Killers always keep trophies. Or they make mistakes in disposal because they are rushing. I needed to find that vial. But first I needed to shake him. I needed to let him know he was being watched without revealing who was watching. I opened a new browser window on the laptop. I knew Brent's email. I knew his phone number. I wasn't going to hack him. Not yet. I was going to haunt him. I found a picture of an insulin vial online. Fast acting, the one with the orange cap. I printed it out on my old inkjet printer. I took a red marker and wrote one word across the image: murderer. I folded the paper. Tomorrow morning when Brent woke up, he would find this sliding under the front door. He would think it was Jasmine's ghost. He would think it was a neighbor. He would never suspect the old man living in the backyard who couldn't even hold a vase without dropping it. I looked at the gun one last time, then put it back in the lockbox. Not tonight, Brent. Tonight you sleep. But tomorrow the nightmare begins, and I am going to be the monster under your bed. The sun had barely risen over the wet Chicago skyline when the sound of a car door slamming shattered the morning silence. I was sitting by the window of the granny flat, nursing a cup of black coffee and watching the main house like a hawk. A white Mercedes convertible was parked in the driveway right next to Brent's SUV. It was aggressive and out of place, just like the woman stepping out of it. It was her, the blonde from the funeral. She wasn't wearing funeral blacks today. She was dressed in a sharp crimson power suit with heels that clicked loudly against the pavement like a countdown. She didn't knock. She didn't wait. She keyed in the code to the front door and walked inside as if she held the deed in her manicured hand. I felt a surge of bile rise in my throat. My daughter had been in the ground for less than 24 hours and her replacement was already walking through her front door. But I forced myself to stay in the chair. I forced my breathing to slow. I wasn't just a grieving father anymore. I was an operative on a surveillance mission, and emotion was a liability. I watched the kitchen window. The lights flickered on. I saw movement. Brent appeared wearing a bathrobe. He embraced the woman. It wasn't a hug of comfort between friends. It was intimate, possessive. He kissed her neck, and she laughed, throwing her head back. Then she did something that made me grip my coffee mug so hard I thought the ceramic would shatter in my hand. She walked to the cabinet. Jasmine's cabinet. She opened it and reached past the guest mugs, past the generic white cups, and pulled down a specific mug. It was hand-painted ceramic, oversized and yellow with a small chip on the rim. Jasmine had made that mug in a pottery class we took together 10 years ago. It was her favorite. She drank her tea from it every single morning. It was sacred. And this woman, this stranger, was pouring coffee into it. I stood up. My knees popped, but I didn't feel the pain. I needed to get in there. I needed to hear them. I needed to confirm what my gut was already screaming at me. I grabbed my cleaning rag and a bottle of wood polish. I put on my old worn-out cardigan, the one with the hole in the elbow. I slumped my shoulders, curving my spine to shave 2 inches off my height. I needed to look small. I needed to look harmless. I walked across the yard and let myself in through the back door. The kitchen smelled of fresh coffee and expensive cloying perfume. Brent and the woman were leaning against the island. When I entered, the woman stopped laughing and looked at me with eyes as cold as a frozen lake. "Oh," she said, her voice flat. "This must be him." Brent didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. He just took a sip from his own mug. "Wallace, this is Valerie. She is the real estate broker I told you about. She is going to handle the sale." Valerie. The name tasted like poison. She looked me up and down, her gaze lingering on my frayed sweater and my work boots. She didn't offer her hand. She didn't offer a condolence. She looked at me like I was a stain on the marble floor. "So this is the tenant," she said, turning back to Brent as if I wasn't there. "You said he would be gone by today." "He is packing," Brent said quickly. "Right, Wallace. You are packing." I nodded, keeping my eyes on the floor. "Yes, sir. Just came to polish the dining table one last time. Jasmine always liked it shiny." Valerie scoffed. She took a sip from Jasmine's yellow mug, leaving a smear of bright red lipstick on the rim. It felt like a desecration. "Well, hurry it up," she said. "We have a lot of work to do. This place needs to be staged, and frankly it needs to be sanitized. It feels heavy in here. Depressing." She walked past me into the living room, her heels clicking on the hardwood. I followed, keeping my head down, clutching my rag. She stopped in the center of the living room, spinning around to survey the space. Her eyes landed on the window that looked out into the backyard directly at my granny flat. Her face twisted in disgust. "God, Brent, look at that," she said, pointing a manicured finger at my home. "That little shack out back. It is hideous." "It is an accessory dwelling unit," Brent said defensively. "It adds value." "No, it doesn't," Valerie snapped. "It looks like a tool shed. It ruins the sightlines from the master bedroom, and it smells." "Can you smell that?" "It smells like old people, like mothballs and failure." I stood there, freezing in the doorway. Mothballs and failure. That shack was where I rebuilt my life. That shack was where I read bedtime stories to my grandson Owen. Buyers in this price bracket don't want a tenant living in the backyard. Valerie continued, her voice rising. "They want privacy. That thing needs to go. I can get a demolition crew out here by Monday morning. We can bulldoze it flat and lay down some sod. It will open up the yard, bulldoze it." She wanted to erase me, literally wipe my existence off the map. Brent laughed. It was a nervous, weak sound. "Bulldoze it, huh? That might be expensive." "It will add $50,000 to the asking price," Valerie said, turning to him and running a hand down his arms. "Think of the return on investment, baby. Plus then you don't have to worry about evicting him. If the house is gone, he has to leave." Brent looked at me, then looked back at her. He smiled. A cruel, calculating smile. "You are the expert, Val. If you say it goes, it goes. Monday, then." He turned to me, his eyes devoid of any humanity. "You heard her, Wallace. Monday. The bulldozers are coming. Better have your boxes packed." I felt a heat rising in my chest so intense I thought I might spontaneously combust. They were discussing the destruction of my home while drinking coffee from my dead daughter's cup, but I swallowed the rage. I forced it down into the pit of my stomach where it would fuel me later. "I understand," I mumbled, my voice trembling not with fear but with suppressed violence. "I will just finish polishing this table and get out of your hair." "Good," Valerie said, turning her back on me. "Make it quick." They walked over to the large bay window, discussing paint colors and staging furniture. They were distracted. Arrogant. They thought I was just a senile old man wiping down a table. I moved to the large oak dining table. It was heavy with a thick carved base. Perfect. I reached into my pocket. My hand closed around a small black disc about the size of a quarter. It was an audio bug. High-frequency, long battery life. I had bought a dozen of them from a surplus store years ago and kept them maintained. I sprayed the polish on the table. The smell of lemons filled the air, masking the sound of my movements. I rubbed the surface vigorously, my arm moving in wide circles. "Oops," I muttered loud enough for them to hear. I dropped the cap. I bent down, groaning as my old knees hit the floor. I crawled under the table, pretending to search for the plastic cap. While I was down there, I peeled the adhesive backing off the bug. I reached up and pressed it firmly against the underside of the table, right in the center, where the wood was unfinished and rough. It stuck instantly. "Got it," I said, wheezing slightly as I pulled myself back up, holding the cap. Brent didn't even look around. "Just finish up, Wallace." I wiped the table for another 10 seconds just to sell the act. Then I gathered my supplies. "I will get out of your way now," I said. I walked out of the room, my back hunched, my head bowed. I heard Valerie's laugh as I exited the kitchen. Finally, she said, "God, he gives me the creeps. How did you live with him staring at you from the backyard for so long?" "It wasn't easy," Brent replied. "But it is over now." I closed the back door and walked across the lawn. The wind was picking up, rustling the dead leaves around my feet. Monday. They were going to bulldoze my home on Monday. That gave me 3 days. 3 days to dismantle their lives before they dismantled my house. I entered my flat and locked the door. I went straight to my desk and put on my headphones. I turned on the receiver. The signal was strong, crystal clear. I heard the clink of the mug being set down on the table. I heard the rustle of fabric. So Valerie's voice came through the headphones, sharp and clear. Let's talk numbers, real numbers. How bad is it, Brent? There was a pause, a heavy sigh. It is bad, Brent said. I checked the accounts this morning. Jasmine had everything locked down tighter than I thought. I can't access the main savings without a death certificate, and probate is going to take months. We don't have months, Valerie hissed. Karloff called me again this morning. He is losing patience, Brent. He said if he doesn't see the first installment by Friday, he is going to start sending people. And not to talk. Karloff. I wrote the name down on my notepad, underlining it twice. That wasn't a bank. That wasn't a credit card company. Karloff sounded like the kind of name you whispered in fear. How much do we owe? Brent asked, his voice shaking. $2 million, Valerie said. And that is just the principal. The interest is compounding daily. We need to sell this house for cash. We need a quick close, no inspections, no contingencies. That is why you want to bulldoze the granny flat, Brent realized. Exactly, Valerie said. We need curb appeal. We need a buyer who walks in, sees the view, and writes a check. We can't have your father-in-law wandering around looking like a charity case. It scares off the money. $2 million. Brent was in the hole for $2 million to a man named Karloff. But we can't sell until the deed clears, Brent said, and the coroner is dragging his feet on the autopsy report. Don't worry about the coroner, Valerie said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I have a friend at the county office. For 10 grand, he can make sure that report says whatever we want it to say. Natural causes, asthma, heart failure, whatever gets the insurance payout released fastest. I froze. My hand hovered over the notepad. Insurance payout. And the life insurance, Brent asked. $3 million, Valerie said. Double indemnity for accidental death. If we can prove it was an accident, we get 6. But let's stick to the asthma story. It is cleaner. Once that money hits, we pay Karloff, we take our cut, and we disappear. We can be in Rio by Christmas. Rio. They were planning to run. And what about the kid, Brent asked. What about Owen? I held my breath. Valerie laughed. A cold, heartless sound. The kid is baggage, Brent. You said it yourself. He is whiny, he is expensive, and he isn't even yours biologically. He looks just like his mother. I felt a chill go through me. Owen was the spitting image of Jasmine. We can leave him with your parents, Valerie suggested. Or put him in boarding school. Just get him out of the way until the deal closes. He asks too many questions. He saw too much that night. He was asleep, Brent said quickly. He didn't see anything. Are you sure? Valerie challenged. Because kids pretend to sleep. If he saw you switch the meds, if he saw you with the pillow... Stop, Brent snapped. Don't say it, not here. I slammed my fist onto the desk. The pillow. Owen had seen something. My grandson was in danger. They viewed him as baggage, as a liability. And if they were willing to kill Jasmine for insurance money, they wouldn't hesitate to remove an 8-year-old boy who knew too much. I took off the headphones. My hands were trembling, but my mind was ice cold. I had the motive. $2 million in debt to a loan shark named Karloff. I had the method. Switching meds. A pillow. I had the plan. Sell the house, falsify the coroner's report, abandon my grandson, and flee the country. And I had a name. Karloff. I needed to find out who this Karloff was. If he was pressuring them, he was the key. Criminals turn on each other when the pressure gets high. But first, I had to secure Owen. They were going to send him away, or worse. I looked out the window. Owen was usually at school by now, but I saw movement in the upstairs window of the main house. A small hand pressed against the glass. He was home. They were keeping him home, isolating him. I needed to get to him. I needed to hear what he saw that night. Valerie wanted to play dirty. She wanted to bulldoze my life. Well, I was about to show her that you don't bring a bulldozer to a demolition derby. You bring a wrecking ball. And I was just getting started. The afternoon sky hung low and heavy over the estate, painted in shades of bruised purple and charcoal gray. I sat in my darkened kitchen watching the main house through the slats of the blinds. I was waiting for a window of opportunity. Brent and the woman Valerie had left an hour ago in her white Mercedes, presumably to meet with this Karloff character, or perhaps to falsify more documents. That meant Owen was home alone, or at least unsupervised. I saw movement in the backyard near the old oak tree where Jasmine had hung a tire swing 3 summers ago. It was Owen. My grandson looked small against the vast manicured lawn. He wasn't swinging, he wasn't running. He was sitting on the damp grass with his knees pulled up to his chest, staring at nothing. He looked like a ghost haunting his own childhood. He was wearing his pajamas even though it was 2 in the afternoon. I checked the driveway one last time, empty. I slipped out the back door of the granny flat, moving with the quiet efficiency that had kept me alive in dangerous places decades ago. I didn't walk straight across the lawn. I hugged the perimeter, utilizing the overgrown hedges for cover until I was just a few feet away from him. "Owen," I whispered. He jumped his head, snapping up. His eyes were wide, rimmed with red, and dark purple circles bruised the skin beneath them. He looked exhausted, not just tired, but depleted, as if his very life force was being siphoned away. "Grandpa," he breathed. He didn't run to me. He didn't smile. He just stared as if he wasn't sure I was real. I stepped out from the hedges and knelt in the grass so I was eye level with him. "Hey, soldier. I haven't seen you since the funeral. Are you okay?" Owen shook his head slowly. "I am tired, Grandpa. I am always tired now. My head feels like it is full of cotton." I reached out and touched his forehead. He was clammy. His pupils were dilated, sluggish to react to the gray light. "Why are you so tired, Owen? Are you sleeping at night?" He nodded, but his eyes filled with tears. "Daddy makes me sleep. He says I need to be strong, so I have to drink the special milk." My blood ran cold. "Special milk? What kind of milk, Owen? It is pink," he said, his voice trembling. "It tastes like strawberries, but it has a funny aftertaste. Like pennies. Daddy says it is vitamins." He stands there and watches me drink it every night right after dinner. He won't leave until the glass is empty. Then I get so sleepy, Grandpa. My arms get heavy and I can't move my legs. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. He was drugging him. Brent was sedating an 8-year-old boy, probably with crushed antihistamines or benzodiazepines mixed into strawberry syrup. That explained why he wanted to send him away. Owen was a liability he needed to keep sedated until he could be discarded. "Does he give it to you every night?" I asked, keeping my voice calm despite the rage boiling in my gut. "Every night since Mommy got sick," Owen whispered. "Even the night she died." I froze. This was it. The missing piece of the timeline. "Owen, look at me. This is very important. The night Mommy went to heaven, did you drink the milk?" "Yes. But I spilled some. I didn't want to drink it because my tummy hurt, but Daddy got mad, so I pretended to drink it all. I poured half of it in the plant pot when he turned around. Smart boy. My smart, brave boy. So you weren't fully asleep, were you?" He shook his head and a single tear rolled down his cheek. "No." I woke up. I heard noises. Thumping. Like someone was moving furniture. It was coming from Mommy's room. I gripped his small shoulders gently. "What did you do, Owen?" "I got up," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I walked to the hallway. The door to Mommy's room was open, just a crack. The light was off, but the hall light was on. "And what did you see?" He squeezed his eyes shut, his body trembling. "I saw Daddy. He was standing by the bed. He had the big white pillow. The one from the guest room. The heavy one." I stopped breathing. The audio recording. Valerie had mentioned a pillow. He was pushing it down. Owen said, a sob escaping his throat. He was pushing it down on Mommy's face. She was moving Grandpa. Her arms were flapping like a bird trying to fly. But she was weak. So weak. I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight as he began to cry into my old cardigan. I wanted to scream. Owen sobbed. I wanted to run in and push him off, but my legs wouldn't work. The milk made me so heavy. I tried to yell, but nothing came out. I just stood there and watched. And then she stopped moving. Daddy stood up. He was breathing hard. He looked at the door and I got scared, so I crawled back to my bed. I pretended to sleep. I rocked him back and forth, my own eyes burning. He had witnessed his own mother's murder. He had stood there paralyzed by the drugs his father fed him and watched the light go out of his world. "It is not your fault, Owen," I whispered fiercely into his ear. "You hear me? It is not your fault. The milk made you weak. You were a brave boy to even get out of bed." He pulled back, wiping his nose. Is Daddy going to hurt me too, Grandpa? He looks at me like he hates me now. He says I look too much like her. No, I swore. He is never going to hurt you again. I promise you, we are going to fix this. But I need you to do something for me, Owen. I need you to be a spy, just like in the movies we watch. Can you do that? He nodded, sniffing. I need you to show me where the milk carton is, or the bottle he puts the medicine in. Do you know where he keeps it? Owen thought for a moment. He keeps a little orange bottle in the high cupboard above the fridge, behind the cereal boxes. He crushes the white pills into the milk. Okay, that is good. That is evidence. Before I could ask him anything else, the sound of tires crunching on gravel echoed from the front of the house. They were back. I scrambled to my feet. Listen to me, Owen. You have to go back inside. Go to your room. If he tries to give you the milk tonight, you pretend to drink it but spit it out. Can you do that? I think so. Go. Run. Owen turned and ran toward the back door, his small legs pumping. I watched him go, my heart breaking. I wanted to take him right then. I wanted to put him in my truck and drive until we hit the ocean, but that would be kidnapping. Brent would call the police. They would hunt me down. I would lose him forever and Brent would get away with murder. I needed that bottle, and I needed that milk carton from the trash. I moved toward the back door, intending to slip in while they were unloading the car. But I was too slow. The back door flew open. Brent stood there framed in the doorway. His face was flushed, his tie loosened. He looked like a man on the edge of a breakdown. He saw Owen running up the stairs. Then he looked out and saw me standing by the hedges. His eyes went wide with fury. "What are you doing?" he roared. He didn't wait for an answer. He stormed down the steps, marching across the lawn with long, angry strides. "I told you to stay away from him," he shouted, spitting as he spoke. I held my ground, straightening my spine. "I was just saying hello, Brent. He is my grandson." He reached me and shoved me hard in the chest. I staggered back but didn't fall. "He is my son," he yelled, "and you are a trespasser. I saw you talking to him. What did you tell him? What lies are you feeding him?" I brushed off my cardigan. I didn't tell him anything. He told me he was tired. He told me about the milk. Brent's face went pale. The anger drained away for a split second, replaced by pure terror. Then the anger returned, doubled. He turned and looked up at the window where Owen was watching. "Owen," he screamed. "Get down here, now!" "No, Brent," I said, stepping forward. "Leave him alone." He ignored me. Owen appeared in the doorway, trembling. "Did you talk to him?" Brent demanded, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Did you tell him our business?" I just said hello, Daddy," Owen stammered. "Liar." Brent lunged. He grabbed Owen by the arm, jerking him down the last step so hard the boy stumbled. "You little ungrateful brat, after everything I do for you. I feed you, I clothe you, and you go behind my back talking to this old leech." He raised his hand. "No!" I shouted. Smack. The sound of his hand hitting Owen's face cracked through the yard. Owen screamed, holding his cheek, falling to the grass. I saw red. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I launched myself at Brent, tackling him around the waist. We hit the ground hard. I was old, but I was heavy, and I had the element of surprise. "Run, Owen," I yelled. "Run to your room and lock the door." Owen scrambled up and fled inside, sobbing. Brent roared and threw me off him. He was younger, stronger. He kicked me in the ribs, and I gasped, rolling away. He stood up, breathing heavily, adjusting his suit jacket. He looked down at me with pure hatred. "You just made a big mistake, Wallace. Huge." I struggled to my knees, clutching my side. "You hit a child, Brent. You are a monster." He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I am a father disciplining his son. And you. You are a security threat." He walked over to the garden shed and grabbed a heavy chain and a padlock. He marched to the gate that separated the granny flat yard from the main house garden. He slammed the gate shut, wrapped the chain around the latch, and clicked the padlock home. "Consider yourself evicted from the family," he spat. "You stay on your side of the fence until the bulldozers come on Monday. If I see you near the main house again, if I see you talking to Owen, if I even see your face in the window, I will call the cops and tell them you attacked me. I have the bruises to prove it now." He pointed to the grass stain on his suit. "You are a prisoner, Wallace. Enjoy your last weekend." He turned and walked back to the house. He slammed the back door and I heard the deadbolt slide into place. I stood up slowly, my ribs aching. I was locked out, separated from the evidence, separated from the boy who needed me. I looked at the padlock. It was a master lock, cheap, pickable. But Brent wasn't just relying on a lock. I saw him appear in the kitchen window. He was holding a phone. He was looking right at me. He was watching. I limped back to my flat. I went inside and closed the door. I went to the sink and splashed cold water on my face. He thought he had won. He thought locking a gate would stop me. He forgot who I was. I dried my face and looked in the mirror. My eyes were hard. He hit Owen. He drugged him. That was the line. I went to my desk. I opened the laptop. I needed to escalate. If I couldn't get into the house physically, I would get in digitally. I would tear his life apart from the inside out. I pulled up the Wi-Fi scanner software. Brent had changed the password to the main house network. He thought he was clever. But he was using the default router settings provided by the ISP. I knew the model. I knew the vulnerability exploit. I typed in a string of code. Connecting. Connected. I was in. I accessed his browser history. I accessed his smart home devices. I accessed the baby monitor camera he still had in Owen's room, which he probably forgot about. The feed popped up on my screen. Owen was on his bed, crying, holding his cheek. I watched him for a moment, whispering a promise to the screen. Then I opened a new window. I navigated to the dark web marketplace search engine. I typed in Brent's username, which I had found in Jasmine's notes. Transaction history. And there it was. 3 months ago. A purchase order for insulin aspart, fast-acting, bulk quantity, delivered to a P.O. box in his name. I hit print. The printer whirred to life. I had the purchase. I had the witness. I had the motive. But I needed him to panic. I needed him to make a move that would expose him to the world, not just to me. I picked up my burner phone. I sent a text message to Brent's number. I saw you hit him. I know about the milk. I know about the pillow. Tick-tock, Brent. I watched the camera feed in the kitchen. Brent looked at his phone. He turned pale. He dropped the glass of water he was holding. He spun around, looking out the window at my flat. But my lights were off. I was just a shadow in the dark. He ran out of the kitchen. I smiled grimly. Let the games begin. The night settled over the estate like a shroud, heavy and suffocating. But inside my small granny flat, the air was electric with the hum of electronics. Brent thought he had neutralized me by chaining the back gate and changing the Wi-Fi password. He thought he had cut off my lines of communication and isolated the enemy. He was a fool. He didn't understand that for 30 years my job wasn't just auditing ledgers, it was piercing through layers of corporate security to find the rot hiding underneath. I sat at my desk, the glow of my monitors reflecting in my glasses. The laptop I used was a beast, a modified machine I kept for consulting work I rarely took anymore. It was running a Linux distribution built for penetration testing. I scanned for wireless networks. The signal strength from the main house was strong. There it was, Miller Estate Secure. He had changed the SSID and the password just an hour ago, thinking that a simple alphanumeric string would keep out an old man who he assumed struggled to program a microwave. I launched a packet sniffer software designed to intercept data traveling through the air. I didn't need to guess his password. I just needed to wait. I needed one of his devices, a smart thermostat, his phone, or Valerie's laptop to disconnect and reconnect to the network. When that happened, the device would send a handshake, a coded greeting to the router verifying the password. I would catch that handshake in midair. I waited. Patience was a muscle I had exercised for decades. 10 minutes passed, then 20. I watched the data stream scrolling down my screen like a digital waterfall, then a spike. A device in the master bedroom, likely a smart TV, reconnecting for a late-night stream. Got it. I captured the handshake file. Now came the brute force attack. I ran the captured file against a dictionary of millions of common passwords and variations. My laptop fans whirred to life, spinning fast as the processor crunched the numbers. Brent was arrogant. Arrogant men rarely choose random strings of characters. They choose words that reflect how they see themselves. Words of power. Words of success. 3 minutes later, the screen flashed green. Password found. Billionaire mindset. I let out a short, dry laugh. It was pathetic. He was a cliché wrapped in a suit. I typed the password into my own connection manager. The internet icon turned solid. I was in. I was back inside his digital house, and he didn't even know I had a key. Now that I was on the local network, I was invisible. I wasn't just looking for internet access. I was looking for the backups. Brent was the type of man who, terrified of losing his leverage, kept digital copies of everything. He likely had a network-attached storage drive somewhere in the house, probably in the office I had seen earlier. I scanned the local IP addresses. There it was, a high-capacity drive labeled Brent Personal. I navigated the file structure. It was password protected, of course, but network drives often had vulnerabilities. I exploited a known backdoor in the drive's firmware, a security patch he had likely ignored for years. The folders opened up before me like a blooming flower. Financials, crypto, real estate, and a folder simply titled Medical. I opened it expecting to find Jasmine's falsified records, or maybe the fake coroner's report Valerie had mentioned. But what I found was far more damning. It wasn't a document. It was a browsing history archive. Brent had been using a Tor browser to access the dark web, but he had foolishly taken screenshots of his transactions. Maybe he needed them for his own twisted accounting. Maybe he was keeping receipts to blackmail someone else later. I opened the first image. It was a screenshot of a marketplace page on the dark web. The background was black, the text neon green. The item description made my stomach lurch. Insulin aspart. Rapid acting. 1,000 units. 10 vials. The date of the transaction was July 15th, 3 months ago. I stared at the screen, my hands clenched into fists so tight my fingernails bit into my palms. Jasmine wasn't even sick in July. She was planning a summer barbecue. She was teaching Owen to swim, and while she was living her life, Brent was online in the shadows buying the weapon that would kill her. This wasn't a crime of passion. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision born of desperation. This was a cold, calculated execution planned a quarter of a year in advance. He had bought the insulin knowing exactly what it would do. He knew that switching her long-acting maintenance dose with a rapid-acting version would cause her blood sugar to crash violently while she slept. He knew it would mimic a seizure or a stroke. He knew it would kill her silently, leaving her gasping for air in the dark while he lay beside her feigning sleep. I scrolled to the next image. It was a tracking number for a private courier service. The delivery address wasn't the house. It was a P.O. box in a neighboring town registered under a fake name. John Doe. How original. I printed every single screenshot. The whir of my printer felt like the sound of justice grinding into gear. I had the timeline. I had the weapon. I had the purchase order. But I needed more. I needed him to crack. I needed to see the fear in his eyes that he had inflicted on my daughter. I needed to turn his arrogance into panic because a panicked man makes mistakes. A panicked man turns on his accomplices. I picked up my burner phone. It was a cheap, prepaid device I had bought with cash years ago for emergencies. I had never used it until tonight. I pulled up the feed from the kitchen security camera on my second monitor. The scene was domestic, almost peaceful. Brent and Valerie were sitting at the kitchen island drinking wine, the very wine Jasmine had been saving for our anniversary. They looked relaxed. Valerie was laughing, her hand resting on Brent's forearm. They were celebrating. They thought they had won. They thought the old man was locked in his shed, crying himself to sleep. I typed the message into the burner phone, my thumbs moving with deliberate precision. I didn't want to be wordy. I wanted to be terrifying. I know what you bought on the dark web. July 15th. 10 vials. I hit send. On the monitor, I saw Brent's phone light up on the counter. He ignored it at first, laughing at something Valerie said. Then the screen lit up again as I sent a second message, a picture of the screenshot I had just found. He frowned, reaching for the phone casually. He unlocked it. I watched his face transform. The smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated horror. The color drained from his skin, leaving him gray and pasty. He dropped the wine glass. Smash! Red wine exploded across the white marble countertop, looking like a splatter of blood. Valerie jumped back, startled. "Brent, what is wrong?" she asked, reaching for him. He pulled away from her as if she were radioactive. He stared at the phone, his hands shaking violently. He looked around the kitchen, his eyes darting to the windows, to the doors, to the dark corners of the room. "Who is this?" he whispered, but the high-fidelity microphone I had planted picked it up clearly. "Who is what?" Valerie asked, grabbing a paper towel to blot the wine. "Someone knows," Brent hissed. He held the phone up to her face. Look at this." Valerie read the screen. Her eyes went wide. She looked at Brent with immediate suspicion. "Did you tell anyone?" she demanded, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "No, I didn't tell anyone," Brent shouted, panic rising in his voice. Is this you? Are you trying to cut me out? Is this Karloff? Don't be stupid, Brent, Valerie snapped. Why would I text you this? If I wanted to cut you out, I would just leave. This is someone else. Did you use a secure connection? Did you delete the history? Yes, I think so, Brent stammered. I saved a copy on the drive, but it is encrypted. No one can get in there. Valerie grabbed his collar, pulling him close. You saved a copy, you idiot. You saved a receipt for the murder weapon. I needed it for leverage, Brent yelled, pushing her away, in case things went wrong. Well, things are going wrong now, Valerie screamed. Who has this? Is it the police? If it was the police, they would be knocking down the door, Brent said, pacing the kitchen like a trapped animal. This is blackmail, or a threat. He spun around and looked out the window directly at the granny flat. It is him. It has to be him. The old man. Valerie laughed, a harsh barking sound. Wallace. Please. He doesn't even know how to use a smartphone without his reading glasses. He thinks the cloud is something in the sky. He is a gardener, Brent. A senile gardener. He was in the bedroom this morning, Brent said, his eyes narrowing. He was acting strange. He dropped a vase. Maybe he saw something. He saw you sleeping, Valerie countered. He didn't see a digital receipt from 3 months ago. Unless he is some kind of hacker, which he isn't. It is Karloff. It has to be. He is squeezing you. He wants you to know he owns you. Brent ran a hand through his hair, pulling at the roots. If Karloff knows about the insulin, he knows we killed her. He can use that against us. He can send us to jail if we don't pay. We have to pay him, Valerie said, her voice cold and pragmatic. We sell the house, we pay the debt, we leave. We can't sell the house until the old man is gone, Brent yelled, slamming his hand on the counter. And now this. Someone is watching us, Val. I can feel it. Good, Valerie said. Let them watch. Let them see us get rich. But we need to accelerate the timeline. We can't wait until Monday for the bulldozers. We need to get Wallace out tomorrow. How, Brent asked. We can't legally evict him that fast. We make him leave, Valerie said. We make it so unbearable he chooses to go. Or we scare him off. Brent looked at his phone again, staring at the message. I don't know, Val. This is specific. July 15th. 10 vials. Only you and I knew that date. Are you accusing me? Valerie asked, her eyes narrowing into slits. I am saying it is a coincidence, Brent muttered. A very dangerous coincidence. I sat back in my chair, watching the seeds of distrust bloom. They were turning on each other. Brent suspected Valerie. Valerie suspected Karloff. Neither of them suspected the old man in the backyard because their prejudice blinded them. They saw gray hair and assumed incompetence. They saw silence and assumed ignorance. I picked up the burner phone again. I wasn't done. I needed to push them further. I needed to isolate Brent completely. I typed one more message. I know about the fake signature on the insurance policy too. I hit send. Brent read it. He looked at Valerie, who was pouring herself another glass of wine with trembling hands. He didn't show her the phone this time. He slid it into his pocket, his eyes shifting. He was realizing that maybe, just maybe, he was alone in this. If he thought Valerie was leaking information, he wouldn't trust her. And if he didn't trust her, he would try to hide the evidence himself. He would try to move the physical proof he had buried. And that was exactly what I wanted. I wanted him to dig up the bodies so I could take a picture. I turned off the monitor and sat in the dark. The game had changed. I wasn't just defending my home anymore. I was hunting, and tomorrow when the sun came up, I would be ready to close the trap. The morning sun did little to warm the chill in my bones as I stood on the porch of the main house, my hand hovering over the doorbell. I took a deep breath, letting my shoulders slump and my face slacken into a mask of weary defeat. I needed to look like a man who had been beaten. I needed to look like a man who was ready to sell his dignity for a comfortable retirement. This was the most dangerous gamble yet. I was going to walk into the lion's den and offer him a piece of meat, hoping he wouldn't notice the poison hidden inside. I pressed the button. It took a full minute for the door to open. Brent stood there looking like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin pale and pasty, and he was still wearing the wrinkled dress shirt from yesterday. He looked at me with a mixture of paranoia and exhaustion. "What do you want, Wallace?" He snapped, his hand gripping the doorframe, white-knuckled. "I told you to stay on your side of the fence. I am calling the police." I raised my hands in a gesture of surrender. "No police, Brent. I am done. You win." He blinked, confused by my sudden capitulation. "What? I am tired, Brent," I said, my voice cracking just enough to sound pathetic. "I can't live like this, locked out, scared. You are right. This house is too much for me. I don't want to fight you anymore. I just want to go." Brent's eyes narrowed, suspicion warring with hope. "You want to leave? I want to move to Florida." I lied, spinning a fantasy I knew would appeal to him. "My brother is down there. I want to sit in the sun and forget about all this. But I can't do that on my pension. I have no savings. Jasmine..." Well, you know how it was. I let the sentence trail off, implying that Jasmine had left me nothing, feeding into his narrative that she was bad with money. Brent straightened up slightly, sensing an opportunity. "So what are you saying, Wallace?" "I am saying I will sign whatever you want," I said, looking him in the eye. "I will sign a quitclaim deed on the granny flat. I will sign a statement saying I am moving out voluntarily. I will disappear. Today." He licked his lips. "And what do you want in return?" $50,000, I said. He laughed, a harsh, barking sound. 50 grand. "You are out of your mind, old man. It is a fraction of what the house is worth," I countered, keeping my tone pleading, not demanding. "And it is the price of a quick sale. If I stay here, if I fight the eviction, this drags on for months, maybe a year. You know the tenant laws in Illinois. You can't sell with me back there. But for 50,000 I am gone by noon, and you can list the house tomorrow for whatever price you want." I saw the gears turning in his head. He was doing the math. 2 million in debt versus 50,000 to clear the obstacle. It was a no-brainer. He needed liquidity, and he needed it fast. My presence was the only thing blocking the sale. He opened the door wider. "Come in." I stepped into the foyer. The house was quiet. Valerie wasn't around, probably sleeping off the wine or hiding from the paranoia I had induced last night. "We go to the office," Brent said, walking briskly down the hall. "We are doing this now, before you change your mind." I followed him, my heart pounding against my ribs. I wasn't just walking into his office, I was walking into the command center of his criminal enterprise. The office was a mess. Papers were strewn everywhere. The shredder was full. He sat behind his massive mahogany desk and pointed to a chair. "Sit." I sat, gripping the armrests as if I needed support. "I don't have 50,000 in cash," Brent said, typing furiously on his laptop. "I know," I said. "Give me 5,000 now. Cash. To get me to Florida. You wire the rest when the house closes." He stopped typing and looked at me. "You trust me to pay you later." I shrugged. "You are a businessman, Brent. You want a clean title. You won't risk a lawsuit over pocket change. Just put it in writing." He smirked. The arrogance was back, replacing the fear. He thought he had played me. He thought I was just a greedy old man looking for a payout. He didn't realize that by asking for money, I was validating his own worldview. To a man like Brent, everyone had a price. My demand made sense to him. It made me predictable. "I will draw up an agreement," he said, the printer whirring to life. "Full release of claims. You vacate the premises immediately. You agree not to disparage me or the estate. And you waive any right to Jasmine's assets." I nodded. "Just get me the cash." He handed me the paper, still warm from the printer. "Sign here, and here." I pretended to read it, squinting through my glasses. My hand shook as I picked up the pen. I signed my name, Wallace Jefferson, in a shaky, jagged script that looked nothing like my real signature. It was the signature of a defeated man. "Good," Brent said, snatching the paper away. He looked at it like it was a trophy. "Now the cash," I said, holding out my hand. He sighed, rolling his eyes. "You are a piece of work, Wallace. Selling out your daughter's house for a condo in Boca." I felt a flash of white-hot anger, but I shoved it down. I needed this. I needed him to open the safe. "Wait here," he said, standing up. He walked to the large oil painting on the far wall. It was a pretentious, abstract piece, swirls of red and black. He didn't check to see if I was watching. Why would he? I was just the help. I was the old man he had just bought. He gripped the frame and swung the painting outward on hidden hinges. There it was, a wall safe, electronic keypad. I stayed in my chair, but I shifted my weight slightly, leaning to the left. On the desk, right next to his laptop, was a silver picture frame holding a photo of him and Jasmine on their wedding day. The glass was reflective. I focused on the reflection. It was distorted, inverted, but clear enough. Brent stood with his back to me, blocking the keypad with his body. He thought he was being careful, but he made a critical mistake. He punched the numbers in with his right hand while holding the painting with his left. His elbow moved with each press. Top left, top right, bottom middle, top left again. I visualized the standard keypad layout. 1, 3, 8. 1. Wait. No. The elbow dropped lower on the second press. Not 3, 6, or maybe 9. I listened. Beep, 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 beep. The tones were subtle but distinct. High, medium, low, high. 1591. No, that wasn't it. He paused. He hit the hash key. A red light flashed in the reflection. Wrong code. He swore under his breath. Damn it. He tried again. This time he was slower, more deliberate. He didn't use the keypad. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a physical key. My heart sank. A bypass key. He was too flustered to remember his own code, or maybe he had changed it recently and forgot. He inserted the key and turned it. The safe clicked open. I leaned back quickly, assuming my passive posture just as he turned around. He held a thick envelope. Here, he said, tossing it onto the desk. 5 grand. All hundreds. Don't spend it all on bingo. I reached for the envelope. My fingers brushed the cash. It felt dirty. Thank you, Brent, I said, standing up. I will go pack my bag. Be gone by noon, he said, turning back to his computer. Or I call the sheriff to enforce this contract. I walked to the door. I had the cash. I had the contract, which was proof of his coercion. But I didn't have the safe code. I had failed. I stopped at the doorway. One last thing, Brent, what he snapped, not looking up. You might want to check the battery on that safe lock, I said. I heard it beeping weird when you tried the code. Jasmine always said those digital locks get glitchy when the battery is low. He looked up, surprised. He glanced at the safe, which was still open. Yeah, whatever, he muttered. Just go. I walked out of the office and down the hall. I moved slowly, letting my cane tap against the floor. But my mind was racing. I hadn't failed. I had learned something better. He had a physical key, and he kept it in his pocket. But people like Brent, creatures of habit and convenience, rarely kept a master key on their person at all times. It was bulky. It was uncomfortable in suit pants. I bet my pension that when he showered or when he slept, that key ended up in the valet tray on his dresser. And tonight during the dinner party, he was planning to impress this Karloff character. He wouldn't be wearing his suit jacket. He would be trying to look relaxed. I walked back to the granny flat, clutching the envelope of cash. I threw it on the table next to the laptop. $5,000, blood money. I looked at the monitor. The baby monitor feed from Owen's room was still active. Owen was sitting on the floor playing with a broken action figure. I am coming for you, kid, I whispered. I had bought myself time. Brent thought I was leaving. He would relax his guard. He would focus on the buyer. I picked up the burner phone. It was time to set the stage for the evening's entertainment. I sent a text to Vance. Tonight is the night. I need a tale on a man named Karloff. He is coming to the Miller estate at 7 p.m. He is the money man. And Vance, bring backup. I have a feeling this dinner party is going to get violent. I sat down and started to pack a real bag. Not for Florida, for war. I packed my lockpicks. I packed the audio bugs. I packed a small canister of pepper spray I had bought for Jasmine years ago, which she never used. And then I went to the small kitchenette. I opened the cabinet under the sink. I pulled out a bottle of bleach and a bottle of ammonia. I wasn't going to make a bomb. That was amateur hour. I was going to make a distraction. Brent wanted to sell the house. He wanted to show off the property to Karloff. Well, I was going to make sure the house gave them a reception they would never forget. I looked at the clock. It was 11 a.m. I had 8 hours until dinner. I wasn't leaving by noon. I was going underground. I went to the closet and pulled out a sleeping bag. There was a crawl space under the main house accessible from a small vent behind the hydrangeas in the garden. I had installed the insulation down there 5 years ago. It was tight, it was dirty, and it was full of spiders. But it was directly under the dining room. I would be right beneath their feet when they sat down to eat. I would hear every word, and when the time was right, I would make my presence known. I took one last look at the granny flat, my home. I turned off the lights, I locked the door, and then I crawled into the darkness to wait for the devil to arrive. The crawl space was damp and smelled of earth and old insulation, but it was the perfect vantage point to hear the devil arrive. At exactly 7 o'clock, the heavy thud of car doors slamming echoed through the floorboards above my head. I checked the time on my watch. Punctual. I liked that in an enemy. It made them predictable. I crawled toward the vent I had loosened earlier, pushing my way out into the cool evening air of the garden. I brushed the dirt off my trousers and adjusted my tie. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was about to perform. I walked around to the front of the house just as the front door opened. Brent was standing there wearing his best suit, looking nervous. A massive black SUV idled in the driveway. The engine purred with the low rumble of a beast waiting to pounce. Two men stepped out first. They were wide, thick-necked, and wore suits that struggled to contain their bulk. I saw the telltale bulge of shoulder holsters under their jackets. These weren't real estate appraisers. They were muscle. Then Karloff emerged. He was a small man, surprisingly unremarkable at first glance. He wore a gray suit that cost more than my first house and wire-rimmed glasses that gave him the look of an accountant. But his eyes were dead. They swept over the Victorian facade of Jasmine's home, not with appreciation, but with the cold calculation of a butcher sizing up a carcass. He didn't care about the architecture or the history. He only cared about how fast he could bleed the equity dry. I stepped onto the porch, my hands clasped behind my back, playing the role of the submissive servant. Brent jumped when he saw me. "What are you doing here, Wallace?" he hissed, his eyes darting to Karloff. "I thought you were gone." "I couldn't find a taxi." I lied, my voice trembling slightly. "And I saw you had guests. I thought since I am still technically on the payroll until noon tomorrow I could assist." "You look short-handed." Brent hesitated. He wanted me gone, but he also wanted to impress Karloff. He didn't have a butler or a caterer because he was broke. Having an old man serve drinks might add a layer of old money legitimacy he desperately craved. "Fine," he muttered, "but keep your mouth shut, serve the wine, clear the plates, then disappear." I nodded and opened the door for them. Karloff walked past me without a glance. He brought the smell of cold ozone and expensive tobacco with him. The two guards followed, taking up positions by the entrance and the dining room door. They scanned the room professionally. They missed the bug under the table. They missed the camera in the vent. They only looked for guns and badges. I went to the kitchen. Valerie was there arranging a tray of hors d'oeuvres, her hands shaking so bad she almost dropped a cracker. She looked at me with pure venom. "Why are you still here?" she whispered. "I am just helping Val," I said, picking up the decanter of red wine. Brent asked me to. She glared at me but didn't argue. She was terrified of the men in the other room. I walked into the dining room. Brent and Karloff were seated at the long oak table. The bug I planted was directly between them. "Nice property," Karloff said, his voice devoid of inflection. "Liquidation value is acceptable, but the title needs to be clean." "It will be," Brent assured him, leaning forward. "My father-in-law is signing the quitclaim tonight. The probate is expedited. We can close by Friday." "Friday," Karloff repeated. "Friday is good. Friday is the deadline, Brent." I moved around the table, pouring the wine. I moved slowly, my hand shaking just enough to sell the act of a frail old man. I filled Brent's glass. Then I moved to Karloff. Brent had placed his phone on the table to his right, face up. It was the latest model, encased in black leather. I had the exact replica in my apron pocket. A dummy phone weighted correctly with a tracking chip and a microphone inside, but no working screen. It was a risky swap, a magician's trick, and I hadn't done sleight of hand since I entertained Owen at his 5th birthday party. I needed a distraction, a big one. I stood behind Karloff. I tipped the decanter. The red liquid streamed into his glass. I watched the level rise. I didn't stop. "Whoa," Brent said. "Wallace, watch it." I jerked my hand, feigning a spasm. The heavy crystal decanter clipped the edge of the glass. The goblet tipped. A wave of dark red wine splashed across the table, cascading onto Karloff's pristine gray lap. "You stupid old fool," Brent shouted, jumping up. Karloff didn't shout. He stood up slowly, looking down at the stains spreading across his trousers. The silence from him was more terrifying than any scream. The two guards stepped forward, hands reaching inside their jackets. "Oh my God, I am so sorry," I stammered, dropping the decanter on the table with a loud clatter. "My hand. It just cramped. I am so sorry, sir." I grabbed a napkin and lunged forward as if to wipe Karloff's suit. "Get away from him," Brent yelled, pushing me back. In the chaos, everyone was looking at Karloff. Everyone was looking at the wine dripping onto the rug. Brent had turned away from the table to shove me. My left hand hovered over Brent's phone. Now. I swiped his phone and slid the dummy into its place in one fluid motion. It took less than a second. I dropped Brent's real phone into the deep pocket of my apron where it nestled against the pepper spray. Karloff raised a hand and the guard stopped. He looked at me. His eyes behind the wire-rimmed glasses were flat and reptile cold. "It is fine," he said softly. "Accidents happen." He took the napkin from my hand and dabbed at his suit. He didn't look angry. He looked bored, which was worse. It meant violence was just a chore to him. "Go to the kitchen." Wallace Brent snapped his face pale. "Get some club soda, now." I nodded, bowing my head, and backed out of the room. I felt the weight of the stolen phone against my hip. It was hot like a burning coal. I had his digital life in my pocket, his texts, his emails, his location history, and most importantly, his two-factor authentication codes. I went into the kitchen. Valerie was pacing. "What happened?" she asked. "I spilled the wine," I said, grabbing a bottle of soda water. "You idiot," she hissed. "You are going to get us killed." I didn't answer. I walked back to the dining room door, but I stopped just out of sight. I needed to hear this. I needed to verify the recording later, but I needed to know the stakes now. Brent was apologizing profusely. "I will pay for the suit. I will pay for the cleaning." "Sit down," Brent Karloff said. His voice was low, but it carried through the room. I heard the scrape of a chair. "We are not here to talk about laundry," Karloff continued. "We are here to talk about the $2 million you lost. My investors are very unhappy, Brent. You told them the crypto arbitrage was a sure thing. You told them you had insider knowledge." "I was lied to," Brent stammered. "The market crashed. It wasn't my fault." Karloff made a tutting sound. "Fault is irrelevant. Restitution is mandatory. You offered this property as collateral. You said it was yours to sell." "It is mine," Brent said. "My wife passed away. I am the sole heir. The old man is leaving. The house is worth $3 million easy." I listened, holding my breath. "But I hear rumors," Karloff said. "Rumors that the deed is tied up in a trust. Rumors that the old man isn't as senile as he looks." "Who told you that?" Brent asked, his voice rising in panic. "I have eyes everywhere," Karloff said. I smiled in the hallway. Vance. My friend Vance had been planting seeds in the underworld. He had spread the rumor that the property title was messy. He had spooked the sharks. "Listen to me very carefully," Brent Karloff said. His tone changed. It wasn't business anymore. It was personal. It was violent. I leaned closer to the doorframe. "You have until Friday at noon to transfer the deed or the cash. If the money is not in my account..." He paused. The silence stretched thin and tight like a piano wire. "If the money is not there, I will take payment in trade." "What does that mean?" Brent whispered. "Kidneys are fetching a high price on the black market," Karloff said casually, as if discussing the price of soybeans. "And young healthy organs are even more valuable." Brent gasped. "You can't mean..." "Your son," Karloff said. "Owen. He is 8 years old. Healthy. O-negative blood type if my sources are correct. Universal donor. Very much in demand." I felt the blood drain from my face. I had to grab the doorframe to keep from falling. He wasn't just threatening Brent. He was threatening to harvest my grandson. "No," Brent said, but it was weak. A whimper. "You leave him out of this." "Then pay me," Karloff said. "Friday. Noon. Or I come for the boy. And I won't take the whole boy, Brent. I will just take what I need. I will leave the rest for you to explain to the police." I heard the sound of chairs scraping back. "Thank you for the wine," Karloff said. It was a bold vintage. A bit messy, though. Like you. I retreated to the kitchen, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had known they were bad. I had known they were desperate. But this was pure evil. Karloff was a monster, and Brent had invited him into our home. I heard the front door open and close. The heavy SUV engine started up and faded into the distance. I stood in the kitchen, clutching the bottle of club soda. My hands were shaking not from age, but from a rage so profound it felt like it was burning my soul. Brent walked into the kitchen. He looked like a dead man walking. His skin was gray, his eyes hollow. He walked past me without even seeing me. He went to the liquor cabinet and poured himself a glass of whiskey. He downed it in one gulp. Valerie grabbed his arm. "What did he say, Brent?" Brent looked at her, then he looked at me. "He said we have until Friday," he whispered, "or everyone dies." He was lying to her. He didn't tell her about Owen. He didn't tell her the specific threat. He was protecting himself, hoarding the horror. "Get out, Wallace," he said to me, his voice flat. "Just get out." I set the soda water on the counter. "I am going, Brent," I said. I walked out the back door into the cool night air. I walked to the granny flat and locked the door. I sat down at my desk and pulled Brent's phone out of my pocket. I had the recording, I had the threat on tape, but the police wouldn't act fast enough. Karloff was slippery. If they arrested him, his men would still come for Owen. I looked at the picture of Owen on my desk, his smiling face, his innocent eyes. Friday. That gave me 48 hours. I picked up the burner phone and dialed Vance. "Vance," I said, my voice steady and cold as the grave. "It is worse than we thought. They are targeting the boy." I heard Vance inhale sharply. "What do you need, Wallace?" "I need an extraction team on standby," I said, "and I need you to find out where Karloff sleeps." "Why?" Vance asked. "Because I am not waiting for Friday," I said. "I am going to make them turn on each other before the deadline." I looked at Brent's phone in my hand. It was unlocked. I had watched him type the passcode earlier that day through the window. 1, 2, 3, 4. Idiot. I opened his messages. I found the thread with Valerie. I typed a message. "I am cutting a deal with Karloff. I am giving him the house and I am blaming you for the insulin. Sorry, babe. Survival of the fittest." I hit send. Then I opened the thread with Karloff's number, which was listed under K. I typed another message. "I have the money, but Valerie is trying to steal it. She's going to the police. You need to stop her." I hit send. I sat back and watched the chaos begin. I had just lit a match in a room full of gasoline. Now I just had to make sure Owen didn't get burned. The silence inside the main house was heavy and thick, like the air before a thunderstorm. I sat in the darkness of my granny flat, watching the digital clock on my desk tick past 3 in the morning. The lights in the master bedroom had gone out 4 hours ago. The sedative I had slipped into the decanter of red wine during the chaos with Karloff was a potent benzodiazepine cocktail I had kept from an old case involving a pharmaceutical executive. It wasn't lethal, but it was enough to put a rhino into a coma for 8 hours. Brent and Valerie weren't just sleeping, they were under. I stood up and checked my pockets. I had my lockpicks. I had a pair of thin latex gloves. And in my breast pocket, right over my heart, I had the empty glass vial of insulin I had retrieved from the trash days ago. It was the smoking gun, the physical remnant of the murder weapon. And tonight I was going to return it to the scene of the crime. I crossed the wet grass of the backyard, moving like a shadow. The wind was howling, masking the sound of my boots on the wooden steps of the back porch. I didn't need to pick the lock this time. I had unlocked the kitchen window latch earlier when I was getting the club soda. It slid up silently. I climbed over the sink, my joints protesting but holding firm. The house smelled of stale wine and fear. I moved through the kitchen, past the spot where Brent had dropped the glass, past the dining room where Karloff had threatened to harvest my grandson. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist around me, but I wasn't afraid of the dark. I was the thing in the dark. I reached the bottom of the stairs. I took off my boots, leaving them by the door. I climbed in my socks, testing each step before putting my full weight on it. 3rd step, skip. 7th step, hug the wall. I knew the groan of every board in this house. Jasmine used to laugh about it, saying the house talked to us. Now it was whispering secrets to me, helping me hunt her killer. The door to the master bedroom was ajar. I pushed it open with one gloved finger. The room was cold. The window was cracked open, letting in a draft that smelled of rain and dead leaves. Moonlight cut across the bed, illuminating 2 figures entangled in the sheets. Brent was on his back, his mouth open, snoring softly, a deep, rhythmic rattle that spoke of deep chemical sedation. Valerie was curled on her side, facing away from him, her blonde hair fanned out across the pillow. I walked to the side of the bed. I stood over Brent, looking down at the face of the man who had looked me in the eye at my daughter's funeral and told me to move on. He looked peaceful. He looked innocent. It was a lie. Even in sleep, his face held a slack arrogance. I reached into my belt and pulled out a paring knife. It was a simple tool, a wooden handle, a 3-inch steel blade sharp enough to shave with. I had sharpened it myself, sitting on my porch thinking about justice. I leaned over him. I brought the blade down slowly until the tip was hovering an inch above his jugular vein. I could see the pulse beating there, a steady rhythm of life that he had denied Jasmine. It would be so easy. One quick motion, a slash, a gurgle. It would be over. The threat to Owen would be gone. The debt to Karloff would die with him. I could drag his body to the car, drive him to the river, and make it look like a deal gone wrong. I knew how to clean a crime scene. I knew how to plant evidence. I could frame Karloff. I could frame Valerie. My hand tightened on the handle. The rage that had been a cold knot in my stomach flared hot and white. This man killed my baby girl. He watched the light fade from her eyes and then went online to check his crypto balance. He deserved to bleed. He deserved to feel the terror she felt in her final moments. I took a breath, ready to strike. But then I looked at the nightstand. There was a picture of Owen there, a school photo smiling with a missing front tooth. If I killed Brent, I became a murderer. I crossed a line that I could never uncross. And if I got caught, Owen would be the son of a victim and the grandson of a killer. He would be alone in a world that chewed up orphans. And death was too fast. Death was an escape. Brent didn't deserve peace. He deserved a living hell. He deserved to watch his world crumble brick by brick, knowing he was powerless to stop it. He deserved to feel the walls closing in. I slowly pulled the knife back. I slid it back into my belt. I wasn't going to kill him. I was going to haunt him. I reached into my breast pocket and pulled out the empty insulin vial. The label was peeled off, but the orange cap was distinctive. It was the exact type he had bought on the dark web. The exact type that had stopped Jasmine's heart. I leaned in close, so close I could smell the sour wine on his breath. I placed the vial gently on the pillow right next to his head. I positioned it so that it would be the very first thing he saw when he opened his eyes. I stood back and looked at my work, a small glass bottle, a tiny object. But to a guilty man, it was a scream. It was a message from the grave. I backed out of the room, leaving the door exactly as I found it. I went downstairs, put my boots back on, and climbed out the window, locking it behind me with a shim I carried. I was back in my granny flat before the clock struck 4. I didn't sleep. I sat by the window watching the main house, waiting for the sun, waiting for the scream. It happened at 7:15. The morning light was gray and dull, filtering through the heavy clouds. I saw the light in the master bedroom turn on abruptly. Then I saw the shadow of a man pacing frantically back and forth past the window. I couldn't hear the scream through the double-paned glass, but I saw the reaction. The back door of the main house flew open. Brent burst out onto the patio. He was wearing only his boxer shorts and a t-shirt. He was barefoot on the cold, wet concrete. He held the vial in his hand, gripping it so tight his knuckles were white. He looked wild. His eyes were wide, darting around the yard, scanning the bushes, scanning the trees, scanning the sky, as if he expected to see a ghost. Valerie ran out after him, wrapping a silk robe around herself. "Brent, what is it?" she yelled, her voice shrill, carrying over the morning air. He spun on her, holding the vial up to her face. "Where did this come from?" he screamed. Valerie recoiled, looking at the small bottle. "I don't know. What is it?" "It was on my pillow," Brent shouted. "I woke up and it was touching my face." He threw the vial onto the grass. It didn't break. It rolled, stopping near the rose bushes Jasmine had planted. "Who was in the room?" Brent demanded, grabbing Valerie by the shoulders. "Did you put it there? Is this some kind of sick joke? Are you trying to make me crack?" Valerie shoved him off. "Get off me. I was asleep. I didn't put anything anywhere. Maybe you left it there. Maybe you are sleepwalking. You took those pills last night." "I didn't leave the murder weapon on my own pillow," Brent roared. "Someone was in the house. Someone was watching us sleep." He spun around, looking at the granny flat. His eyes locked onto my window. I was ready. I was sitting in my armchair wearing my pajamas, holding a mug of tea, looking for all the world like a man who had just woken up. I waved at him slowly, confusedly. Brent stared at me. I could see the gears turning in his head. He wanted to blame me. He wanted to storm over here and accuse me. But he stopped. He looked at his own hands shaking uncontrollably. He looked at the distance between the house and my flat. He looked at the chain he had put on the gate. The lock was still secure. "Impossible," he muttered. I read his lips. He turned back to Valerie. "It wasn't the old man. He can't even get through the gate. And he doesn't have a key." "Then who?" Valerie asked, looking terrified. "Karloff," Brent whispered. "It has to be Karloff. He has men. Professionals. They can get in anywhere. He is sending a message. He is telling me he can get to me whenever he wants. Even in my sleep." He ran a hand through his messy hair, pulling at it. "He could have killed me, Val. He was standing right over me, and he left this instead. He is playing with us. "We need to call the police," Valerie said, "and tell them what Brent snapped, that a loan shark broke in to return an empty vial of insulin that we used to kill my wife. Use your brain. We can't call anyone." He looked down at the vial in the grass. He picked it up, handling it like it was a live grenade. "We have to burn this," he said, "and then we have to find the money. Today." He ran back into the house. Valerie followed him, casting one last fearful glance at the yard. I took a sip of my tea. The warmth spread through my chest. He didn't suspect me. His prejudice was his blindfold. He saw an old man and assumed weakness. He saw a grandfather and assumed harmlessness. He couldn't conceive that the person dismantling his life was the one person he had dismissed as irrelevant. I set the mug down. Phase 1 was complete. He was terrified. He was paranoid. He was isolated. Now it was time for Phase 2. He was going to try to destroy the evidence. He was going to dig up the rest of the kit, the needles, the gloves, the things he hadn't thrown in the trash. I checked my monitors. The infrared camera I had installed in the oak tree facing the woods was active. I knew where he had buried the rest. I had seen the disturbed earth weeks ago before I even knew what it meant. Brent was going to lead me right to the final nail in his coffin, and when he did, I would be watching. Criminals always keep a piece of the crime. In my 30 years of auditing fraud and tracing money trails for the Department of Justice, I learned that human beings are fundamentally hoarders of their own guilt. It isn't always rational. Sometimes it is a trophy, a twisted memento of the power they exerted over their victim. But more often with amateurs like Brent Miller, it is simply panic paralyzed by procrastination. They intend to destroy the evidence. They plan to burn the clothes or melt the weapon. But in the immediate aftermath of the deed, when the adrenaline crashes and the cold reality of murder sets in, they freeze. They are terrified that the act of destruction will itself attract attention. A fire in the backyard looks suspicious. A trip to the dump leaves a digital trail of GPS data, so they hide it, they bury it deep, telling themselves they will come back for it when the heat dies down. But the heat never dies down. It only rises. And the evidence sits there rotting in the dark, waiting for someone like me to shine a light on it. I knew Brent hadn't disposed of the kit. The insulin vial on his pillow had terrified him because it was a piece of the puzzle he thought was lost. But the rest of it, the needles, the latex gloves, the empty packaging for the sedatives he fed my grandson, that was still here. He wouldn't have thrown it in the weekly trash collection. He was too paranoid for that. He wouldn't have driven it to a dumpster because Valerie was always watching him, and trust among thieves is a fragile thing. No, he had kept it close. He had buried it on the property where he could keep an eye on it, where he could ensure it remained undisturbed. It was his anchor, and it was going to be the weight that dragged him to the bottom of the ocean. I sat in my darkened living room monitoring the feeds. I had 3 screens active. One showed the interior of the kitchen where Brent was pacing back and forth, his phone pressed to his ear. Another showed the driveway. The third and most important screen showed the infrared feed from the camera I had mounted high in the branches of the old oak tree in the backyard. I watched Brent. He was unraveling. The psychological warfare was working. He looked haggard, his expensive suit rumpled, his hair a mess. He was shouting into the phone, likely screaming at his lawyer or perhaps begging Karloff for more time. But every few minutes he stopped pacing. He would walk to the sliding glass door that looked out onto the expansive backyard. He would stare out into the gloom. He wasn't looking at the horizon. He wasn't looking at the swimming pool. He was looking at a specific point in the yard. His eyes always returned to the same spot like a compass needle finding north. The oak tree. It was a massive ancient tree that had stood on this land for 100 years. Jasmine loved that tree. She used to sit under it and read. She hung a tire swing from it for Owen. It was a place of life and joy. And now, as I watched Brent's terrified gaze fixate on its gnarled roots, I realized he had turned it into a tomb. I zoomed in on the feed. The ground beneath the tree looked undisturbed to the naked eye, covered in a layer of dead autumn leaves. But infrared told a different story. The heat signature of the soil was different there. It was subtle, but the density was inconsistent with the surrounding earth. Someone had dug there recently. The soil was looser, holding moisture differently than the packed earth around it. I rewound the footage in my mind. 3 weeks ago, just days after Jasmine died, I had seen Brent out there at midnight. I had thought he was grieving. I had thought he was seeking solace under his wife's favorite tree. I remembered feeling a pang of sympathy for him, a moment of shared sorrow. I was a fool. He wasn't grieving. He was hiding his sins. He was burying the murder weapon in the same soil where my daughter used to play. The audacity of it made my blood boil. He had desecrated her sanctuary. But that anger was good. It sharpened my focus. I knew where the bodies were buried, metaphorically speaking. Now I just needed him to leave so I could dig them up. The opportunity came at 10 o'clock. I saw Valerie come downstairs carrying a designer handbag. She was arguing with Brent. I switched the audio feed to the kitchen bug. "We have to meet the lawyer, Brent," she was saying, her voice shrill. "We need to finalize the paperwork for the sale. Karloff gave us until Friday. We can't be late. I can't leave the house." Brent argued, his voice trembling. "What if someone breaks in again? What if they find it?" "Find what?" Valerie asked sharply. "Nothing," Brent snapped quickly. "Just the valuables. The watch collection." He was lying to her. He hadn't told her about the stash under the tree. He didn't trust her enough. "We have to go," Valerie insisted. "If we don't sign the preliminary transfer papers today, the escrow won't clear in time to pay Karloff. Do you want to lose your kidneys, or do you want to sell the house?" Brent ran a hand over his face. "Fine, fine. We go. But we set the alarm, and we lock the gates." He looked out the window one last time, staring directly at the oak tree. He stood there for a long moment, as if saying a silent prayer to the God of hidden things. Then he turned and followed Valerie out the door. I watched them leave on the driveway monitor. The black SUV pulled out of the gate and turned left toward the city. I waited 5 minutes just to be sure they weren't circling back. Then 10. The coast was clear. I grabbed my gear. A small folding shovel from my camping kit, a pair of heavy work gloves, a large plastic evidence bag I had kept from my service days, and my revolver. I tucked the gun into the waistband of my trousers. I didn't expect to use it, but digging up a man's secrets was dangerous work, and I wasn't taking any chances. I stepped out of the granny flat. The air was crisp and cold. The leaves crunched under my boots as I walked across the lawn. I felt exposed. The windows of the main house seemed to stare at me like empty eyes. I knew Brent had cameras too, but I had disabled the exterior feed earlier that morning using a signal jammer I built. To him, the cameras would just look like they were buffering. I reached the oak tree. It was majestic, its branches reaching up to the sky like skeletal fingers. I knelt at the base. I swept away the layer of dead leaves. The earth underneath was dark and soft. I pushed the shovel into the dirt. It gave way easily, too easily. This ground had been turned recently. I dug. The rhythm of the shovel slicing into the earth was hypnotic. Scoop, toss, scoop, toss. I worked methodically, carefully. I didn't want to damage whatever was down there. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the cold. My breath came in short, white puffs. 1 foot down. Nothing. 2 feet. My shovel hit a rock. I pried it out. Just a stone. I kept digging. Doubt started to creep in. Had I misread him? Was he just looking at the tree because he missed her? Was I just an angry old man digging a hole in the backyard looking for demons that weren't there? Then clang. The sound of metal on metal. It rang out through the quiet garden. I froze. I dropped the shovel and fell to my knees digging with my gloved hands. I brushed away the dirt. A corner of gray metal appeared. It was a box. A heavy steel cash box, the kind you buy at an office supply store. It was rusted slightly around the edges, but intact. I pulled it free from the earth. It was heavy. It rattled as I lifted it. I sat back on my heels, holding the box in my lap. This was it. This was the weight Brent had been carrying. The box was locked with a simple key latch. I didn't have the key. I didn't need it. I pulled a screwdriver from my pocket and jammed it into the mechanism. I twisted hard. The cheap lock popped with a snap. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for what I was about to see. I opened the lid. The smell hit me first. It was faint but distinct. The smell of medical alcohol and old blood. Inside, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag, was the kit. I peeled back the plastic. There were 3 unused vials of insulin, the same orange caps I had seen online. There was a box of syringes, half empty, and there was a pair of latex gloves balled up. They were stained, dark rusty brown stains on the fingertips. Dried blood, Jasmine's blood. I felt a sob rise in my throat, but I choked it down. I picked up one of the used syringes carefully by the plunger. There was a tiny amount of fluid left in the needle, and on the needle tip a microscopic trace of dried blood. This was the silver bullet. This was the DNA evidence that linked Brent directly to the murder. He hadn't just switched the meds, he had injected her. He had forced the overdose into her system, probably while she was too weak to fight back. and at the bottom of the box underneath the medical waste was a piece of paper. I unfolded it. It was a printout of a life insurance policy. The new one. The one worth $3 million. At the bottom was Jasmine's signature. I stared at it. I had taught Jasmine how to write in cursive when she was 6 years old. I knew the loop of her J and the cross of her T better than I knew my own. This signature was wrong. The pressure points were off. The slant was too vertical. It was a forgery. A good one, but a forgery nonetheless. And next to it was the witness signature. Brent Miller. He had signed her death warrant and then buried the pen in the backyard. I placed everything back in the box. I sealed it in the evidence bag. I stood up, my knees cracking. I held the bag against my chest. I had him. I had everything. The motive, the method, the weapon, the DNA. I looked up at the house. It looked different now. It wasn't a home anymore. It was just a building, a shell. I checked my watch, 11:30. Brent was at the lawyer's office right now trying to sell a house he didn't own, trying to escape a debt he couldn't pay. He thought he was closing a deal. He didn't know I was about to close the book on him. I walked back to the granny flat. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I walked with the heavy tread of a man who was done playing games. I went inside and placed the box on the table. I picked up my phone. "Vance," I said when he answered. "I have the package. It is exactly what we thought." "Good," Vance said. "The team is ready. We are monitoring the lawyer's office. Karloff just arrived. He looks impatient." "He should be," I said. "I am on my way." I hung up. I went to the closet and pulled out my best suit. It was old-fashioned and smelled of cedar, but it was clean. I put it on. I tied my tie. I polished my shoes. I wasn't going to the lawyer's office as a gardener. I wasn't going as a victim. I was going as Wallace Jefferson forensic auditor. And I was going to conduct the final review of Brent Miller's life. I grabbed the evidence bag. I grabbed the file of the trust fund I had set up 10 years ago. I walked out to my old pickup truck. I turned the key and the engine roared to life. It was a beat-up Ford on the outside, but under the hood I had rebuilt the engine myself. It was powerful. It was reliable, just like me. I pulled out of the driveway, leaving the gate open. I didn't look back. Brent wanted a quick sale. He wanted a fast resolution. I stepped on the gas. I was going to give him speed. I was going to give him a collision he never saw coming. The elevator doors to the 42nd floor of the Sterling Tower slid open with a soft hydraulic hiss, revealing a lobby of polished marble and cold corporate silence. I stepped out onto the plush carpet, adjusting the cuffs of my suit. It was an old suit cut in a style from a decade ago, but the fabric was high quality, and I had pressed it myself that morning until the creases were sharp enough to cut paper. I wasn't walking in as the gardener living in the shack out back. I wasn't walking in as the grieving father. I was walking in as the man who used to make CEOs sweat through their silk shirts during federal audits. I checked my watch. It was 12:15. I was exactly 15 minutes late. I did that on purpose. In a negotiation, power belongs to the one who makes the others wait. I walked toward the glass doors of the conference room. Through the transparency, I could see them. It looked like a tableau of desperation. Brent was pacing back and forth, his hands gesturing wildly. Valerie was sitting at the long table, tapping her long fingernails against the mahogany surface, her leg bouncing nervously. And at the head of the table sat Karloff. He was perfectly still. He didn't look at his watch. He didn't look at his phone. He just watched Brent with the dead, unblinking stare of a reptile waiting for a mouse to tire itself out. Two of his muscle men stood by the door, arms crossed, bulging with concealed violence. I pushed the door open. The heavy glass swung inward on silent hinges. All heads turned to me. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," Brent snapped. His voice was tight, high-pitched. He looked terrible. Sweat had stained the collar of his shirt, and his eyes were darting around the room as if looking for an exit that didn't exist. "Sorry for the delay," I said, my voice calm and deep, filling the room. "Traffic was murder." Brent flinched at the word murder. Good. His conscience was already eating him alive, even if he didn't know it yet. "Just sit down and sign the papers," Wallace Valerie hissed. "We have been waiting." I walked to the empty chair opposite Karloff. I didn't sit immediately. I stood there looking at the loan shark. Up close, he smelled of peppermint and gun oil. "Mr. Karloff, I presume," I said, nodding to him. Karloff didn't smile. He just tilted his head slightly, acknowledging my existence. He was assessing me, trying to reconcile the image of the confused old man Brent had described with the composed figure standing before him. "Sit down," Wallace Brent said, rushing to the table. He grabbed a thick stack of documents and shoved them toward my seat. "This is the quitclaim deed. This is the waiver of inheritance. And this is the non-disclosure agreement. Sign them, all of them." "And my payment," I asked, remaining standing. Brent gritted his teeth. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He slammed it onto the table. $50,000. Cash. Unmarked bills just like you asked for. Now sign. I looked at the envelope. Then I looked at Karloff. "Is this your money, Mr. Karloff?" I asked. Karloff's eyes narrowed. "It is business capital. Does it matter where it comes from as long as it spends?" "I suppose not," I said. I sat down slowly. I picked up the envelope. It was heavy, the weight of betrayal. I opened the flap and pulled out a stack of hundreds. "I'm going to count it," I said. "Are you kidding me?" Brent shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "It is all there. Just sign the damn papers. We have a schedule." I ignored him. I licked my thumb and began to count. 1, 2, 3. The room was silent except for the rhythmic snap of the bills. Snap, snap, snap. I counted slowly, deliberately. I saw beads of sweat rolling down Brent's forehead. I saw Valerie checking her phone, her face pale. I saw Karloff's men shifting their weight, their hands hovering near their waistbands. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Brent looked like he was going to have a stroke. "Wallace, please," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Just sign. 49,900. 50,000. I squared the stack of bills and slid them back into the envelope. I placed the envelope in the center of the table. "It is all there," I said. Great Brent exhaled a long, shaky breath. He pushed a pen toward me. "Sign." I picked up the pen. It was a heavy, expensive Mont Blanc. I turned it over in my fingers, feeling the balance. Then I set the pen down. "No," I said. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. "What did you say?" Brent whispered. I said no, I repeated, leaning back in my chair and crossing my arms. "I am not signing these papers, and I am not taking your money." Brent's face went from pale to purple. "What is this, Wallace? A shakedown. You want more money? Is that it? You greedy old leech. We had a deal. We had a deal based on a lie," I said, my voice hardening. "You told me you had the right to sell the house. You told me Jasmine left it to you." "She did." Brent screamed. "I am her husband." I reached into my jacket pocket. I didn't pull out a weapon. I pulled out a blue folder. I placed it gently on the table on top of the legal documents Brent had prepared. I opened the folder. "Actually, she didn't," I said. I slid the document across the mahogany table toward Karloff. He was the one who needed to see this. He was the one holding the leash. Karloff looked down at the paper. He read it without touching it. His eyes didn't move much, but I saw a muscle in his jaw jump. "What is this?" Karloff asked, his voice dangerously soft. "It is a copy of the Owen Jasmine Living Trust," I explained, "established 10 years ago. The deed to the estate, the land, the granny flat, and all liquid assets were transferred into the trust the day after my daughter bought the property." Brent laughed, a hysterical, high-pitched sound. "That is a lie. Jasmine never told me about a trust. I have power of attorney. I have her will." I looked at Brent. "Of course she didn't tell you. She knew who you were even back then. She knew you were a gambler. She knew you were a risk. She protected her son's future from you." I pointed to the document in front of Karloff. "Read Clause 4, Section B." Karloff read it. "The sole trustee of the estate is Wallace Jefferson," he read aloud. "Upon the death of the primary beneficiary, Jasmine Miller, all assets remain in the trust for the benefit of the minor child Owen Miller. The trustee has sole authority over all property decisions." Karloff looked up. His eyes were no longer bored. They were furious. Brent grabbed the paper, tearing it from under Karloff's gaze. "This is fake. This is a forgery." "No, Brent," I said calmly. "The power of attorney you showed the bank is a forgery. The life insurance policy you signed is a forgery. This trust is registered with the county. It is ironclad." I leaned forward, staring directly into Brent's panic-stricken eyes. You don't own the house, Brent. You don't own the land. You don't even own the furniture. You are a guest who has overstayed his welcome. And as the trustee, I am formally evicting you. You have zero collateral. You have nothing to sell to Mr. Karloff." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Valerie let out a small whimper. "Oh my God," she whispered. "We are dead." Brent was shaking his head violently. No. The lawyer said it was fine. The title search came back clean. "Because you bribed the title officer," I said. "Just like you tried to bribe the coroner. But federal trusts don't show up on a standard title search unless you look for them, and you were too arrogant to look." I turned to Karloff. "So you see, Mr. Karloff, this man has been wasting your time. He promised you a property he has no legal right to sell. He took your money on a promise he could never keep." Karloff stood up. He moved slowly, smoothly, like a predator uncoiling. He turned his head toward Brent. "Is this true?" he asked. Brent backed away, his chair screeching against the floor. No. The old man is lying. He is senile. He forged this. Look at him. He is a gardener." Karloff didn't look at me. He kept his eyes on Brent. "You told me the title was clean. You told me the equity was yours. It is mine," Brent shouted, desperation making him reckless. "I am the husband." Karloff reached out and grabbed Brent by the lapels of his expensive jacket. He lifted him out of the chair as if he weighed nothing. "I don't care about your marriage license," Karloff growled. "I care about my $2 million. You offered this house as payment. If you can't deliver the house, then you have defaulted." "Please," Brent gagged, clawing at Karloff's hands. "I can fix this. I can get the money." "How?" Karloff asked, shaking him. "You have no assets. You have no job. You have nothing." Karloff threw Brent back into his chair. Brent slumped there, gasping for air. Karloff turned to me. "You are the trustee," he said. "Sell me the house. I will give you a fair price. We can cut him out." I smiled cold and sharp. "I don't do business with sharks, Mr. Karloff. And I certainly don't sell my grandson's inheritance to pay off a murderer's gambling debts." "Murderer," Karloff repeated. "Yes," I said. "Did he not tell you? The reason the house is available is because he killed his wife. He injected her with insulin." The room went silent. Even the muscle men looked uncomfortable. Murder brought heat, heat brought police, and people like Karloff hated police. "He is lying," Brent screamed. "It was asthma." "I have the proof, Brent," I said, raising my voice over his. "I have the receipts from the dark web. I have the recordings. I have the syringe you buried under the oak tree." Brent froze. His face went slack. The mention of the oak tree broke him. He knew. He knew I had found it. Valerie stood up, knocking her chair over. "You buried it," she screamed at Brent. "You told me you burned it. You idiot, you moron." She turned to Karloff. "I didn't know, I swear. I just handled the real estate. I didn't know he killed her." Karloff looked from Brent to Valerie, then back to me. He realized the situation had become toxic. This wasn't a business meeting anymore. It was a crime scene waiting to happen. "You brought me into a murder investigation," Karloff said to Brent, his voice trembling with rage. I... Brent stammered. Karloff reached into his jacket. He pulled out a heavy black pistol. He didn't point it at me. He pointed it at Brent. "You are a liability," he said. "Wait," Brent screamed, holding up his hands. "Wait, I have leverage. I still have leverage." "What leverage?" Karloff barked, thumbing the hammer back. The boy Brent yelled. "Owen, he is the beneficiary, right? If something happens to him, the trust dissolves, or the money moves." I stood up, knocking my own chair back. "You leave him out of this." Brent looked at me, a manic grin spreading across his face. It was the look of a man who had realized he had nothing left to lose. "Valerie," he shouted, "call the school. Tell them you are picking up Owen. Tell them it is a family emergency." Valerie froze. "What do it?" Brent screamed. "Go get him. Bring him to the airfield. We are leaving. And if anyone tries to stop us, the boy dies." "No," I shouted, moving toward him. Karloff's guard stepped in front of me, shoving me back. Karloff looked interested. "A hostage," he mused. "That changes the math." Valerie looked at Brent, then at Karloff's gun. She made a choice. She grabbed her purse and ran for the door. "Valerie, don't you dare," I yelled. She didn't stop. She ran out of the conference room, her heels clattering on the marble. Brent laughed. He looked at me, his eyes wide and crazy. "Checkmate, Wallace. You might have the house, you might have the evidence, but I have the boy, And if you want to see him alive again, you are going to sign those papers and you are going to transfer the deed to Mr. Karloff right now." I looked at the door where Valerie had vanished. I looked at the gun in Karloff's hand. I looked at Brent's triumphant face. They thought they had me. They thought I was helpless. I slowly reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "You made one mistake, Brent," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "What is that?" he sneered. "You assumed I was playing by your rules." I pressed a single button on the screen. I didn't call the school. I didn't call the police. I called Vance, and the line was already open. The air in the boardroom curdled into a thick, suffocating tension as Brent scrambled backward, his chair screeching against the polished marble floor like a dying animal. He looked from Karloff's cold, dead eyes to the legal documents on the table that proved he owned nothing. He was a rat trapped in a maze of his own making, and he had just realized there was no cheese at the end, only a trap. "You lied to me," Karloff said, his voice low and dangerous, rising from his seat. "You brought me here to buy a house you don't own, to pay a debt you can't cover." "No, wait, listen to me," Brent stammered, backing up until he hit the credenza. "The old man is lying. He forged it." Karloff signaled to his guards. They stepped forward, their hands reaching inside their jackets. They weren't reaching for pens. Brent's eyes went wide and wild. He lunged not for the door but for his briefcase. His hand dived inside and came out gripping a snub-nosed revolver. "Back off," he screamed, waving the gun erratically between Karloff and me. "Stay back, or I swear to God I will kill all of you." The guards froze. Karloff didn't flinch, but he stopped moving. "You are making a mistake," Brent Karloff said calmly. "Put the toy away." "It is not a toy," Brent yelled, sweat pouring down his face. "I am leaving. I am walking out of here, and no one is going to stop me." He pulled his phone from his pocket with his free hand, his fingers fumbling over the screen. "Valerie," he shouted into the phone. "Do it. Grab the kid. Take him." I stood up slowly, my hands raised to shoulder height. "Brent, don't do this. Leave Owen out of it." "Shut up, old man." Brent spat the gun training on my chest. "You did this. You ruined everything. Now you are going to pay." He put the phone to his ear, listening. "Pick up Valerie," he screamed. "Pick up the damn phone." I watched him. I watched the panic consume him. He was waiting for his accomplice to tell him she had the ultimate leverage. He was waiting to hear that he held my grandson's life in his hands. I reached into my pocket. "Don't move!" Brent shrieked, his finger tightening on the trigger. "I am just getting my phone, Brent," I said, my voice steady, deep and calm. "I think you are calling the wrong person." I pulled my phone out. I tapped the screen. I set it on the mahogany table between us. I pressed the speakerphone icon. The ringing sound filled the silent room. 1 ring, 2 rings. Brent stared at my phone, confused. "Who are you calling?" Then the line connected. It wasn't Valerie. Wallace, a voice crackled through the speaker. Clear, authoritative. "We have him." It was Vance. Brent lowered the phone from his ear, staring at mine. "Who is that?" "That is Special Agent Vance," I said. "Ask him where your son is." "Where is he?" Brent whispered. Mr. Miller, Vance's voice boomed. "I am currently standing outside the elementary school. Your associate Valerie attempted to extract the child 5 minutes ago. She is currently in the back of a squad car being read her rights for conspiracy to commit kidnapping." "No." Brent breathed, the color draining from his face until he looked like a corpse. And Owen Vance continued, his tone softening slightly. "Owen is safe. He is sitting in my cruiser. He is wearing a junior deputy badge and eating a chocolate ice cream cone. He is safe, Brent. He is out of your reach. Forever." The gun in Brent's hand dipped. His leverage was gone. His plan B was in handcuffs. His escape route was closed. You set me up," Brent stammered, looking at me with a mixture of hatred and awe. "You knew." "I didn't just know, Brent," I said. "I orchestrated it. You thought you were playing chess with a senile old man. You didn't realize I was the one who built the board." "I am not going to jail," he whispered. "I am not." He raised the gun again. This time he pointed it at Karloff. "You," he said. "You have a jet. Get me out of here. Take me to the airfield, or I swear I will shoot." Karloff laughed. It was a dry, dusty sound. "You are going to shoot me." With that shaking hand. "You will miss, and then my men will peel you apart like an orange. Police, open up." The shout came from the hallway, muffled by the heavy glass doors, but unmistakable. Sirens wailed outside, a cacophony of sound rising from the street below. Blue and red lights flashed against the windows of the skyscraper, painting the room in strokes of emergency. "It is over, Brent," I said. "Look out the window." He glanced sideways. He saw the lights. He saw the end. "No," he moaned, a sound of pure animal despair. I walked toward the table. "Stay back," he yelled, swinging the gun back to me. I ignored him. I reached into my bag, the one I had brought with me. I pulled out the heavy metal cash box, the one still caked with the dirt from under the oak tree. I slammed it onto the table. The sound cracked like a whip. "Do you recognize this, Brent?" I asked. He stared at the box. He stopped breathing. I took a screwdriver from my pocket and popped the latch. I threw the lid open. The smell of old alcohol and decay wafted out. I reached in and pulled out the plastic bag. I held it up. Inside, the used syringes rattled against the glass vials. "You thought you buried it deep enough, didn't you?" I said, my voice hard as granite. "You thought the earth would keep your secret. But the earth talks, Brent, if you know how to listen." I tossed the bag onto the table. It slid across the polished wood, stopping right in front of him. "That is the syringe you used," I said, pointing. "The one with the residue of the fast-acting insulin. The one you bought on the dark web on July 15th. I have the receipts, Brent. I have the screenshots." He shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "No, I burned the receipts. You deleted them," I corrected. "But nothing is ever really deleted, not when a forensic auditor is looking for it. And the needle tip, that has Jasmine's DNA on it, and the plunger, that has your thumbprint embedded in the plastic." I leaned over the table, getting right in his face, ignoring the gun. "You signed her death warrant, Brent, and then you signed a fake insurance policy to cash in on it. You killed my daughter for a payout you were never going to get. I didn't mean to." He sobbed, the gun hanging loose in his hand now. "It was an accident. I just wanted to make her sick, just sick enough to need money. I didn't mean to give her that much." Confession. Clear as day. And Karloff heard it. His guards heard it. The open line to Vance heard it. "You monster," I whispered. The glass doors exploded inward. Glass showered the room like diamonds. Police dropped the weapon. "Drop it now." A SWAT team poured into the room, moving with fluid, lethal grace. Rifles were trained on every chest. Karloff and his men dropped to their knees, hands behind their heads instantly. They were professionals. They knew when the game was up. Brent stood there frozen, the gun dangling from his finger. He looked at the police, then he looked at me. "Drop it, Brent," I said. "Don't make them shoot you. You don't get the easy way out. You need to sit in a cell for the rest of your life and think about what you did." He looked at the gun. For a second, I thought he might turn it on himself. Then he let go. The gun hit the floor with a dull thud. 2 officers were on him in a second. They tackled him to the ground. I watched his face press into the carpet. I watched his expensive suit tear. I watched the handcuffs click around his wrists. "Get him up," the sergeant barked. They hauled him to his feet. He was weeping now, ugly, snot-nosed sobs. "Wallace," he cried as they dragged him past me. "Wallace, please, help me. I am family." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had murdered my daughter and tried to sell her memory for gambling money. "You are not family," I said. "You are a file number." And I just closed the case. They took him away. They took Karloff. They took the guards. The room emptied out, leaving only the police technicians and me. A detective walked over, putting on latex gloves. He looked at the metal box on the table. "Is this the evidence you told Agent Vance about?" he asked. "That is it," I said. "Handle it with care. It is the only thing left of my daughter's justice." I walked to the window. I looked down at the street. I saw Brent being shoved into the back of a squad car. I saw the lights flashing, illuminating the city. I took a deep breath. My chest hurt. My knees ached. I felt every year of my age. But I also felt lighter. The weight was gone. The secret was out. I picked up my phone. "Vance, are you there?" "I am here, Wallace," Vance said gently. "Owen is fine. He is asking for you." "I am coming," I said. "Tell him Grandpa is coming. And tell him the bad man is gone." I hung up. I straightened my tie in the reflection of the glass. I was Wallace Jefferson, father, grandfather, auditor, and I had just balanced the books.